City Council meeting. Thank you for all for coming and participating. To those of you who sat in the back row, there is a tack in your chair, and as you squirm, it will come up. You in the front row have extra thick cushions. Just a little encouragement. We're going to do roll call again, please. Just so the public knows, Councilmember Martner was with us for the closed session, but she has work in San Francisco tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. And for some reason, she wanted to drive up there. I don't see what the problem is. Just kidding.
Council Agency Member Costa.
Present.
Council Agency Member Martner. Council Agency Member Starbuck.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vice Chair Lingle.
Here.
Mayor Chair John Lynn.
Here. And now an invocation from Pastor Bernie Fetterman. Would you all please rise?
Our God, I come before you invoking your grace and presence upon our community and upon this meeting tonight. And while we pause to pray for ourselves, we are mindful of the devastation upon those in Japan. God of love, be with the people of Japan as they cope with this disaster. God of strength, be with those who are serving in rescue, relief, and recovery efforts. God of peace, continue to touch the suffering human heart. God of generosity, flow through the world as aid and resources are provided. God of hope, be with those who grieve and those still awaiting news of family and friends that are missing. Our God, disasters like this remind us of the frailty of the human condition and that no one is guaranteed tomorrow. So we humble ourselves before your mighty hand, ask for your wisdom and courage and compassion to make the most of every day that we are given, the opportunities afforded to us. Be with those in our own community in need tonight, the loss of loved ones, the loss of income, the desire for employment, the need of shelter. Comfort them and give strength to those who serve others and add value to their lives. I ask that you honor our national, our state leaders, our mayor, our council, our city administrator, and all who serve our city. Give them sound minds, help them to possess right hearts and attitudes, and open their eyes and ears to solutions yet discovered. Give them the wisdom to know what is right and the courage to do it. Give all of us the eyes to see needs around us, the desire to move in response to those needs, and in so doing make a difference in the hearts and lives of others. Watch over those in our city who watch over us and keep us safe. Be with our military all over the world, especially those downrange and in harm's way. We are grateful for your many blessings, your grace, and your mercy extended to us. Keep us, allow your face to shine upon us, and grant us your peace. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We had 3 items in our closed session this evening, 2 on the main agenda and 1 on the supplemental agenda, and we have no reportable actions. However, we're going to report that we're going to have another meeting for another closed session in 2 weeks. No, next week, next Monday. Next Monday, right? Right, next Monday. We will be having a closed session at 4 o'clock. So we will have the usual roll call and opening oral communication at that time, and then we'll go to closed session, which is scheduled for 2 hours to continue on from where we were. Okay, first it was given me a great deal of pleasure to present a proclamation to the Parks and Urban Forestry Manager, Cindy McCall, for Arbor Day. And Cindy and I have been co-conspirators for Arbor Day with the Boy Scout flag ceremony ever since we got together over a bunch of pine trees a lot of years ago. Whereas Arbor Day is dedicated to trees, their preservation, and whereas trees provide a quality living environment and enhance the social, cultural, sensory, and economic diversity of our city, and whereas we must ensure the future of our urban forest for ourselves as well as our children and our children's children, and whereas the City of Lompoc, in partnership with its citizens and the Lompoc Beautification Commission, encourage all residents of the city and valley to observe Arbor Day by planting a tree on their property or taking advantage of the city's ongoing tree planting program. Now, therefore, I, John H. Lynn, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, California, do hereby proclaim Saturday, March 19th, 2011, as Arbor Day in the City of Lompoc, and urge our citizens to plant trees in new places and replace lost trees so that the entire Lompoc Valley will continue to be of distinction and beauty. In witness thereof, I sign it and present it to you. And I know you want to talk about the Arbor Day ceremonies and invite everyone.
Yes, I do. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be before you tonight to talk about Arbor Day this coming Saturday. What kind of Arbor Day would we have if we didn't recognize the wonderful people who've made such wonderful contributions to the Lompoc Valley? People think that I love this day because it's all about trees, but to me it's all about the people who live here. This year we're recognizing 5 wonderful individuals from the City of Lompoc: Rocky Cobb, Sergeant Harry Height, Mr. Ruffner, Larry Schwartz, and Al Thompson. I've known all of these people ever since I moved here, and you couldn't find a better group of people who love Lompoc and have proven it through the service that they've given to our community. Rain or shine, Saturday morning at 11 o'clock at Beatty Park in Recognition Grove, and if it's raining, we'll do as we've done one time before and move down into the gazebo. We'll be celebrating these individuals' contributions to this city by dancing and it's a wonderful event. They'll be receiving their proclamations from members of the council and the mayor and their trees, and I invite you all to come out. If you have any questions, feel free to call me at 736-TREE. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have a presentation by our Management Services Director, Brad Wilkie, on the City of Lompoc General Fund personnel allocations.
Thank you, Management Services Director Brad Wilkie. The recent budget hearings, a question was brought up about how many staffers are within the general fund funded by general fund monies. This presentation, hopefully will be short, will give you an idea about how a couple of the budget functions flow together regarding both the personal position summaries, which is part of the budget, as well as administrative services that are being allocated through the cost allocation plan. The request was made, I believe it was in the February meeting, and in the budget there's a 9-page summary of every single adopted position within the city. Within that, there are 386 positions that are currently authorized within the city as a whole. Of these, 223 positions, or FTEs, are approved within the general fund. And within that, there are 62 positions that are in the areas of the city that are deemed administrative support for all the other divisions and all the other funds that are in the city. And these positions are actually allocated through the cost allocation plan. The big difference between the 223 positions that are authorized in the budget and what is actually net funded in the general fund are effectively how many of the 62 positions, how much of those positions are funded by outside revenue sources. A couple points. There are some minor modifications that I've made to the 9/11 position summary to get to where we are right now. There have been a couple changes that have happened since the budget was adopted. The cost allocation plan is a separate document that's part of the budget at the time it's adopted, which shows how the positions that are providing support services are allocated out to the various funds, utilities, RDA, CDBG, and the like. The one thing I'd like to make a caveat is that I'm only talking about the cost allocation plan at this point in time. There are other allocations and that occur that bring money into the general fund. A really good example is Measure A funds that are used to do street maintenance. I'm not talking about that kind of allocation right now. I'm strictly looking at the cost allocation plan for administrative services. And all the numbers that are in this report are in units of full-time equivalents, or FTEs. This chart shows the entire staffing of the city at 383 people, positions, and how it's broken down between general administration and then other general fund departments, which are primarily police, fire, parks, community development planning, building inspection, recreation, one component of the information system, which the GIS, and then, as I mentioned before, the street-related entities, which are urban forestry, engineering, and street maintenance. This column called service allocations is how the cost allocation plan moves the funding for positions out of the general fund into the other various funds. And of the 62 positions that are in the general services area of the general fund, 52 of those are allocated out. And these areas down here are where they allocated to. Primarily about 46, 47 are allocated to either the enterprise funds or other funds within the city. The net effect, and I'll go a little bit more into it in a later slide, is that from a net point of view, there's 176 FTEs that are funded from the general fund. This slide looks a little bit closer at the individual departments that make up the administrative services that are provided to all the other entities within the city. City administrators, attorney, city clerk, city council, HR, city treasury, copy room, finance, information systems, purchasing, and building facilities maintenance. The percentage that is over here, it shows what the percentage that remains in the general fund from these activities. So as you can see, most of these are significantly less than 50%, and some of them are either zero or very close to zero. City treasurer is a good example. A vast majority of what the city treasurer does is to provide services to bring utility billings, send the utility bills out to the customers, and bring in the payments for utility billing that comes in. And from a volume basis, that's the primary function that Treasury does. And that's why this 2.7% is there, because that's what remains of the activities that they do that is general in nature. The question that was asked was how many employees or positions that are in the general fund that are funded. And this is a summary of a lot of what I just said. There's 223 positions in the general fund from a supervisory function perspective. From the net distribution of those positions after the cost allocation plan funding occurs is 176 positions. So roughly 47 FTEs are funded from outside the general fund that are positions that are, from a budgetary point of view, for expenses in the general fund. The next several slides just reiterate those facts that I just mentioned in slightly different ways. This is showing the distribution of the citywide FTEs, the 383 positions, and how where those end up in the various departments and the various divisions after all those allocations are made. And the big pie parts are the major utilities, engineering, urban forestry, street maintenance, police, and fire. The remaining bars that are down here are all the other funds, and it's a fairly small part of the overall budget, overall pie chart for FTEs. This slide shows of those 62 positions that are administrative in nature and provide services to others, where those positions end up from a funding basis. And as you can see, the pies here are fairly well distributed amongst all the major activities that we do. So the general fund admin is 16, water is 16, wastewater is 14, solid waste is 12, electric's 20. There's nothing in this pie chart that shows to me that there's any extraordinary allocation of any of these positions from the general fund to any other specific fund out there. So there's no payments that are being made exclusively out of one area that takes care of all these FTEs. This is a bridge between that last slide I showed you and where the administrative services are, what is staying in the general fund, what makes those up. And if we go to the next slide, the remaining allocations of those general administrative services, as you can see, some of them are fairly small, with city administrator 3% of the general fund, city attorney 2%, city treasurer 3%, finance utilities about 13%. So what I'd like to get out of this slide is that of the 62 positions that are in the general fund under administrative services, 10 of those remain as a funding obligation of the general fund. So there's not any one person that is in this category. I'll use payroll as a really good example. Payroll is a one-person position. It provides services throughout the organization. 13% of that roughly stays in the general fund based on the allocations. This looks at a different perspective from all the FTEs that are in the general fund, where those allocations show up after the distribution of the administrative services. We put together on purpose all the general fund type activities, and they range all the way from the general administrative down here all the way around over here. So these smaller pie charts are all that's allocated out from the general fund. So it's a fairly small amount when you look at it from the staffing levels of the entire general fund. I have a little asterisk down here for other general funds. This is a fairly large pie, but it's made up of several departments that are within the general fund: parks, building inspection, community development, planning, recreation, and GIS. They're just so small that their pies would look pretty tiny without combining them. This bridges between the funding sources that are coming in the general fund from the cost allocation plan, and it kind of shows, in a general sense, all those non-safety uses of revenues between restricted and unrestricted. The $18.5 million that is made up of this portion of that bar is primarily the administrative service fees that are coming into the general fund to pay for all those administrative services that are being provided. This remainder, which is a conglomeration of all the administrative services, as well as all the other non-public safety non-safety departments in the general fund, which are parks, rec, community development, building inspection, and I'm forgetting a couple others, but those are primarily funded from this category here. So in looking at it from a budgetary point of view, taking a slice out of those departments only gives you about 30 cents on a dollar of savings that would generate a reduction in the budget differential between revenues and expenses as compared to if something was able to be saved in the public safety section. Almost 100% of any savings in public safety would generate a benefit to the general fund, whereas in the non-public safety, it's more like a third. And I go back to a couple of earlier slides. That third is really made up of several things. It's made up of these individual components for all the administrative overhead, the administrative services, but it's also made up of parks, community development, building, inspection, recreation, information services, the GIS part of that, and a certain portion of the streets. So taking all those together are where that 33 or 34% savings comes from, but none of the individual departments is exactly 33 or 34%. Some of them are as little as the 2.7 for treasurer, and some of them are a bit more, where these areas are funded primarily by unrestricted revenues. The restricted revenues that come in for these are planning and development permit fees that would support development planning, building inspection, and to some extent engineering. So to summarize, there's 223 positions in the general fund, and about 176 of those are funded by general fund sources. And I believe that was the question that was asked of me back in the budget hearings. That ends the show, and I am available to answer questions.
So just for those of us who aren't quite as into this, remembering the first time I watched this, the basic explanation is that the general fund operates a lot of administrative processes. It operates the finance department and purchasing and many other things that are, and the use of those is shared by all the other city departments. And at the end of the day, we have an extremely complex method of charging them for exactly what they got. And that's what you were illustrating with your one pie chart, that no one's being charged for more than what the services that they're using.
That's what I get out of that one chart, where it's a pretty even distribution within all the major activities of the city. So, and I kind of go back to, by having such a complete services from the city, we are able to utilize that and use some economies of scale to be able to have just a certain number of people that provide services to all those other entities within the city.
Consolidation economics.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wilkie? The audience, you should know that we were presented with this previously and had our question and answer opportunity, so we're not maybe quite as well versed as we look. We just had a little advanced training on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
City Administrator's report.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, audience, and viewers, the City Administrator's status report includes 3 items. First is a monthly project status report on the Dick Dewey's Community and Senior Center from Senior Civil Engineer Mike Luther, outlining the project's progress since his last report to Council on February 15th. Mr. Luther's status report notes a meeting was held with the architect on March 4th to discuss 2 needed change orders, which staff indicates one is minor and should not cause a delay, and the second could have an impact on the project delivery schedule. However, the extent has not yet been fully determined and will be negotiated in the near future, and the additional information should be provided to you the next project status report. The second item is a monthly status report on the Lompoc Aquatic Center dehumidification project, and this is the second update. There have been no executed change orders, no progress payment requests, and the project is on schedule. The dehumidification units were delivered to the site on Monday, March the 7th. And lastly, I'm very pleased to announce that I received a letter last month from the Arbor Day Foundation congratulating the City of Lompoc Electric Utility, having been named a Tree Line USA utility for the 9th time in recognition of the division's national leadership in caring for and protecting our community's trees while meeting service objectives. The Urban Forestry Manager, Cindy McCall, and the Lompoc Electric Utility Division are acknowledged and commended for their demonstrated commitment to taking care of and protecting trees in our community. And I commend staff for this national prestigious recognition.
Did you find out whose good idea it was? We would like to acknowledge the unsung city employee who managed to find a way to transplant a whole bunch of plants that were going to get bulldozed over at the construction project at the aquatic center and move them over to the city yard. So whoever you were, thank you. We didn't find out in time for the meeting who you were. Okay, and now, Council Development Agency.
Mr. Mayor?
Oops, sorry. Yes.
Excuse me, but I have a comment on the City Administrator's report. First of all, thank you for the updates, but I have to tell you I'm a little concerned about the anticipated delay due to the trusses. It says that they overlooked the wooden trusses and now they have to go with metal trusses because of the heavy partitions. To me, it seems like the architect should have realized that with the weight of these trusses, or the weight of these doors, they should have taken the weight bearing and they should have anticipated this. Now this delay, we don't know what it's going to be, but it will cause a delay. So when you come back with the anticipated delay, I'd like to see us come back with something to say what ways they can expedite some other portion of it that we don't experience a delay. We've told the community for many years now that they're going to be getting this, and now we're coming up with delays again. So personally, I find this to be unacceptable that we're experiencing any delays, and I would like to see what we can do about it. Okay.
Just want to clarify that this will be negotiated and you'll be given the information.
Just from an informational standpoint, I recall when we discussed an alternate floor plan that one of the reasons that the alternate floor plan was found to be unacceptable was that it would require strengthening the ceiling trusses. So it's odd that we talked about it then and it was an issue then and then it was kind of lost. So you might ask that question. Okay, who
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor, excuse me. I do have one more announcement. And it's my pleasure to announce that an offer has been extended to Mr. Steve Boggs to fill the vacant position of Senior Code Enforcement Officer effective April 4th.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, we will have our report on the graffiti abatement program from Police Captain Donald Deming. Captain?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. The Lompoc Police Department has had a long-standing graffiti abatement program staffed primarily by volunteers. It began years ago with the Graffiti Busters and morphed into primarily volunteers from the faith-based community. The program has used RDA funding for equipment and supplies to abate graffiti and to pay for a quarter of the salary for a community services officer. There has never been a formal process established for the removal of graffiti other than this volunteer effort, coordinated by the police department. Since the volunteers are primarily available on Saturdays, inclement weather or other events sometimes interrupt planned abatement operations, and the removal of graffiti may be postponed for prolonged periods of time. The continued presence of this graffiti fuels the public's fear of crime and directly impacts their quality of life. Staff is proposing we expand upon the existing abatement efforts and create a more comprehensive program. By hiring a part-time temporary employee to remove graffiti and to coordinate the volunteers, the community services officer can focus on documenting and investigating graffiti crime. The initial cost for equipment and the part-time salary is detailed in your staff report. They are anticipated to be approximately $15,400 in equipment and supplies, and approximately $3,100 for salary for the first or up to the end of the present fiscal year. Therefore, staff is recommending that the City Council Agency Board authorize the allocation of a total of $18,500 in RDA funds to provide for a part-time temporary employee and to provide for the purchase of the necessary equipment and supplies to remove graffiti within the Old Town Lompoc redevelopment project area. That concludes my report. I'm available for any questions should you have any.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Captain. We're going to be hiring a part-time temporary employee, but graffiti is going to be an ongoing problem unless we come up with a permanent solution, which I don't know if you have a magic wand or something like that, but I think we're going to see graffiti for a while. So this is a part-time temporary position to take care of it temporarily. What long-term plans can we see after this part-time employee is gone?
Conceptually, what we're hoping to see is that this part-time temporary employee, this proposal that we've presented, will have long-term success. That it will prove successful in the early stages, and will continue to receive funding for RDA funds to continue that position.
Okay. So this is a primer for next go-round, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, graffiti is a problem, and I think we have to address it, and I think this is certainly a good start, so thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, would not like to see any short-term fixes, and my one concern, as I voiced previously, is the contentious issue of RDA in the state right now. And so what is our backup plan if RDA is dissolved?
I can speak to that. Based on the most recent conversations I've had with the League of Cities, the money that we have within the city now is well protected by Proposition 22. The question is, what will the legislature do about our future RDA income stream? And the jury's still out on that.
Right. So if I may interject, then even if we are looking at current monies that we have in the coffers, so to speak, then we're still talking short-term fix, because then it's just a matter of how long we can sustain that amount out of the RDA each year or each fiscal year. So that to me is somewhat of a short-term fix.
City Administrator, could you address the portion of the solid waste fund that also addresses graffiti needs?
Well, at this time, the Solid Waste Department or Division funds Code Enforcement Officer that takes care of the alleyways and picks up trash and that type of thing. Is that what you're asking, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, and I was under the impression there was a small amount of money there that went to the graffiti abatement side too. Is this, the other issue here obviously is that this covers the redevelopment area, which doesn't cover the city, so there has to be some supplemental funding source identified this evening to allow this person to go outside the redevelopment area and do graffiti abatement.
The funding in this report supports only the RDA project area.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, you're absolutely right. The redevelopment project area does not cover the entire city. That is, of course, correct. Looking at the map, though, of the redevelopment project area, based on my experience, I'd say probably more than it. The area itself covers about 2/3 of the city. Probably about 90% of our graffiti occurs within that area. So it's really a relatively small amount of the graffiti that is outside the RDA project area.
Yeah, I agree. We'll go on with that. Councilmember Starbuck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, as much as I'm against the growth of government, I'm going to fully support this. One of the questions that I have, though, is there a chance that this program could probably become self-sustaining? And the way that I question that is, I'll give you an example. You just arrested a young man that owes us about $15,000, if I understand, which is just a few thousand short of what we're requesting for a full year. So this possibly could pick up just based on the fines and penalties as we catch them, true?
What we conceptualize in this program is that by freeing the community services officer from the responsibility of coordinating the volunteers coming in, taking them out, that person's job now becomes the documentation of the crime and to assist in the investigation. Upon the successful prosecution of a case, we plan to be able to provide the court with sufficient justification to get restitution for the damage caused by the individual. By freeing up our community services officer to do that, that sets the mechanism in place for us to pursue that, to pursue restitution.
Okay, a couple questions. Is our plan in this, as I had discussed it with you originally, that rather than doing paint outs, we're going to do full wall paint, repaint, so that we don't have this little patchwork thing around our city?
That is what we would like to see in discussing this matter with Mr. Bean. He envisions the same thing. Rather than doing a series of patches, conceptually we would cover as much of an entire area as possible in our efforts to eradicate graffiti.
Because I absolutely would not be in favor of this if that is not what we were doing. We will not have solved the problem if we're just going to put up more patches. And it was my understanding originally that we were going to be supplied with I'm going to use the word surplus, I know it's not the right word, a surplus truck that's coming out of our fleet and isn't allocated, and a generator that's coming out of our warehouse that's written off. And is that still the case? Because I didn't see it noted in the report.
That is my understanding, sir.
Okay. And so the administrator, is that your understanding?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. City Administrator, could you suggest, I got 2 phone calls already after people read this and said, well, I'm not in the redevelopment area and there's graffiti on the bus bench in my block. And I had never really thought about that. Is there a funding source you could readily identify for a small amount of money that could be incorporated into this so we can actually service the rest of the community?
We can take a look at our budget and do a budget adjustment to fund what is necessary to cover the entire city.
Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry.
Yes, Chief.
Mr. Mayor, what we discussed with regard to that is there will be records kept in terms of the graffiti that is abated. And so it would be because of as the graffiti is abated, and hopefully the need for the hourly employee will decrease over time. It may never totally go away, but instead of 20 hours a week, it may be 10 hours a week or less. But at the end of the fiscal year, the RDA would be able to look at the addresses that were abated and separate those from RDA district and those outside the district,
and then that portion can be handled with a budget adjustment at the end of the fiscal year.
City Administrator, is that acceptable?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor.
I don't want to have a false start on this because I've waited so long for it. I would just say to you, Chief, that in the city where this program was put in place, it's got to be 14 years ago. The first time through the city took 3 months with 2 crews. I'm glad we don't have that problem. And they're now down to 5 hours twice a week, and they're about twice the size we are. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that this is something that Mayor Lynn has talked about, and I believe that there's a portion of the staff report on this, but can you just briefly talk about, was it the 5 main color palette that we're going, or is that not something we're talking about anymore?
I can talk about it. Actually, I got the 4 colors from down south, and then after the city administrator and I toured a lot of places, we added dumpster green. But what had been originally used was an off-white, a tan, a brown, and a gray. And then after we looked at all the patchwork dumpsters in Lompoc, dumpster green was added. And we're absolutely certain that some people will want their building painted with that too. Are there any other questions? Public comment is not actually listed for this, but is there anyone that would like to ask a question or speak on this subject? And I invite you to come forward now. Seeing no one rise. You know what? I'm sorry, guys. I got to do it. I move the staff recommendation that we proceed with this program with the other little bits that we've discussed here, and I want to thank the staff personally for bringing this forward, and I know it's going to make a huge difference in our community. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir.
And
Mr. Mayor, I will second it, but I'd like to make one addition to it, and that is that we also authorize the city administrator to look at a budget adjustment to address non-RDA areas, so we don't forget about the rest of the city.
I appreciate that. I didn't add that in. And also it's with the understanding that we're painting out walls and that we're using this surplus equipment. Okay. Any other discussion? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to amend your motion if possible. I do think it's very important what Councilmember Starbuck brought up, that long-term, this is a long-term fix, and that we look at self-sustainability, and that, you know, we can't bank on RDA monies every year. So I would like to see some form of a plan or an outline for the future to address the self-sustainability of the program in the future.
Consider it so amended, and perhaps, Chief, you guys could just come back to us at a future meeting and tell us how you see the recovery from catching the graffiti-esque persons as a long-term offset. Okay, is there any other further discussion on this? Do we need a formal vote, or are we just doing a handshake? I'm sorry, formal vote.
To address, we do collect restitution from the courts now, but typically that's channeled to the general fund. So we'll discuss with the Administrative Services Director of targeting any restitution that comes from the court for that particular crime.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and vote, please. That passes 4-0 with 1 absent. And now for number 2. City Administrator, do you want to speak on the request for proposal to Santa Barbara County for fire protection services to the City of Lompoc and the most recent response?
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, staff is before you tonight to provide you an update on the request for proposal to Santa Barbara County Fire Protection District for providing fire services to the City of Lompoc, and to request your consideration direction regarding whether or not to begin negotiations with the county. To provide some background, the Santa Barbara County Fire District initially responded to the city's request for a proposal of February 16, 2010, submitting a draft response on April 23rd, and a revised draft proposal on October 12th. On September 21st, the council was provided an update on the nature of the response, and following a subsequent update on December 7th, 2010, at the direction and on behalf of the City Council, staff sent the County Executive Office a formal letter on January 13th, 2011, requesting the county provide the city a final proposal. The county CEO reported to the County Board of Supervisors at their meeting on March 1st, 2011, an update on the feasibility and cost to the district to provide fire services to the city of Lompoc. And the board provided the CEO clear direction that any proposal to the city for fire services should be cost neutral to the county and the fire district. And the Board of Supervisors also specified that county staff not spend a great deal of time negotiating because the county currently has fiscal budget gaps that would not enable costs to be transferred to the fire district or to the county. Staff received the final request for proposal dated March 1st, and page 17 of the proposal is attached to staff's report. The costs of service to the city are $4.9 million for the first year of service. Also attached to staff's report is a comparison of fire costs prepared by Management Services Director Brad Wilkie. And the total first-year contract costs of services are $5.8 million, and these costs are $2.5 million in excess of the current 2010-11 fire budget. Staff requests that City Council provide staff direction whether to begin negotiations with the County Executive Officer and Fire Chief, or if the City Council determines the costs for service are not feasible, direct staff to provide the county written notice not to begin negotiations, or provide staff alternative direction. And that concludes staff's report.
So to recap, if we chose to contract with the county today, in addition to what we currently pay for fire services, we would need to pay an additional $2,482,000 first year.
That's correct.
Okay. As we are $1.7 million upside down and trying to deal with that, I can't see any possible way that we can come up with another $2,482,000 on top of it, and I don't really see any point in going any further. And frankly, I'm willing to make a motion after everybody else has a moment to comment if they would like. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Administrator, Ms. Barcelona, is it your understanding, and this is what the feeling I got from the letter that I read and from the staff report, that the county is currently unwilling to negotiate these terms?
No, I would say that it's not that they're unwilling, but that they recognize their budget constraints, and that they made it very clear the negotiations are not to include costs that will be transferred to the county. So all costs will be borne by the city.
Okay, and the second observation I had, this is for Mr. Wilkie. On the attachment provided, there is also under major repairs, there's an amount unknown. So this $2,482,200 could in fact be a larger number in excess.
Correct, and that would be something, if we go further along with the process, that there would be an evaluation of the buildings to see if there is any kind of unexpected repairs that they would want to have us make before they would take them over. But we can't really tell what their expectation would be at this point in time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
Mr. Mayor, are you going to take any public comment on this? Okay, I'd like to hold mine until after public comment then.
Anyone else? Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak on this item?
Mayor, Council, Dwayne Holmdahl, City of Lompoc, live in the City of Lompoc, just put it that way. The best statement I've heard in the last 2 years is the mayor just got through making it, is that you shouldn't go any further. You don't have 2 million, you don't have 3 million. In fact, when she read the letter the last time, they was talking about 6 million in the makeup of this. You cannot afford it. It'd be interesting if you had the time to go back at how much it's cost us in the last 2 years just to do the studies and take away from time. The county is $72 million in debt, and they're not going to negotiate anything. So I think the mayor made the right comment. This should be put to bed and put to sleep forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmdahl. Anyone else that would like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council, members of the community. My name is Brian Fetterman, and I'm a firefighter with the City of Lompoc, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of those firefighters. In 2006, the City Council directed staff to contract with the consulting firm of Olson & Associates to study fire service delivery levels and recommend any improvements needed to bring Lompoc closer to the national standard. After that, Councilman Lingle in 2009 initiated the council majority request a proposal for the provision of fire services by the County of Santa Barbara as a means of exploring the options to accomplish the recommendation of the Olson report. Tonight you've discussed a little bit and been briefed all about the current offer. The proposal accomplishes the recommendations of the Olson report, adding increased staffing levels and provide enhanced services to the citizens of this community. I think that we need to look at this as a starting point for negotiations and discussion. Negotiations is the key word. However, I do feel that your minds have already been made up. So regardless of your decisions tonight, we need to make public safety a priority. Priority. A word with actions behind it, or a word that is defined by more of the same. A word that defines a council making the tough decisions for the better of this community, or a word that is used only as that. We believe that public safety should be the top priority of the City of Lompoc, and together we can take the action steps necessary to prove that. So what do we need? We need a plan. A goal that can be set forth not only to address the immediate needs for the Lompoc Fire Department, but long-range planning with trigger points that allow for plans to become actions. If not, we will be dealing with the same problem again as we have been for 24 years. What kind of plan do we need? Well, your firefighters and your fire chief would be glad to sit with you and create that plan. The Lompoc Fire Department has always been aggressive and worked very hard with what we have and always get the job done the right way for the people of this community. This is something that has earned us a lot of respect by neighboring and state agencies. We are known for our skill level, knowledge, teamwork, and aggressiveness. However, we are struggling to keep up with these expectations. While I will not bore you with the statistics that underscore our limited personnel on any given shift or our continuing rising call volume, since you have received time and time again many reports that detail this. It is time to decide what our priority is, or will the word just be a word, used now and again with no action taken. Your firefighters and fire chief, again, are willing to help put this plan together. There are solutions available, but only if public safety is a priority of yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? You know, I agree completely with Brian. I think we've come down a road that looked like It may have had some potential back in 2009, and it may have had then. But as we all know, the economy has changed dramatically, and we can't get there from here. So now our goal is to look at what we need to accomplish in the future, look at the revenue that comes to us in the future, and develop a plan that not only addresses the issue of public safety, but also the furlough days that we find ourselves in with the rest of our city staff. And I think getting this off the table is the first step in moving in that direction. And as part of my motion, I will also add that the Public Safety Commission be empowered to review the Olson report and their own report and come back to this council with any revisions and recommendations, preferably within 60 days. 30 would be even better. And I'd be looking for a second. Councilmember Lingle.
Mr. Mayor, again, I will like to make an amendment to your motion. And the motion, or the amendment I'd like to make is that we can empower the Public Safety Commission to come back to us with recommendations. But I'd like part of the motion to be on record that this City Council will set a goal to obtain the objectives of the Olson report within a 5-year period, with trigger points along the way negotiated with the firefighters and the chief, so that we know that within 5 years we have obtained that goal. And along the way, we will obtain certain portions of it. So I will second your motion with that amendment.
I'm good as long as you include, as long as we get some money. Because if we don't have any increased income from today, then we're not going to be able to go anywhere. I'm concerned about taking our future income and having an allocation plan.
Mr. Mayor, then I withdraw my my second on your motion then.
Okay. Anybody else want to pick this one up?
What is the motion?
That we discontinue this process with the county, that we ask the Public Safety Commission to bring back to us recommendations, and just to try to get Mr. Lingle on board, we then develop a 5-year plan to implement those recommendations along with dealing with our furlough issue. And if you don't like that one, I'm ready for somebody else to make a different one. I just want to go forward.
I just wanted to make a couple of comment real quick here.
I unmotion and we'll talk some more.
Thank you. You know, a couple of things that concern me about this proposal, and they're going to stand out for a while, is I understand that we're going to still obligate ourselves, if we were to move forward on this, for almost $600,000 a year in CalPERS obligation, which we're just paying then, receiving nothing. Said for months, the fact that we're a full-service city provides a great amount of pride to me, and I'm very reluctant to ever let that go. The biggest concern that I have on this is that this contract, when it ends, what the county deficit in retirement will be then and what the renewal cost would be. And that projection, I see no advantage for Lompoc in that with us. I think we're much better trying to solve this ourselves. I totally concur with the Public Safety Commission coming out with a plan and trigger points. I can tell you currently that I am working with my commissioner on this, and they're going to work in the Public Safety Commission. I think one of the key things that needs to happen in order to accelerate this is that the Public Safety Commission meets monthly instead of bi-monthly. And with that, I would entertain another motion.
Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that the Public Safety Commission should take a large role in this, but I think it's time for council to prove that it is a priority for us, and that meaning we need to take a more active role in that process of creating that plan. I think that getting us involved on this side of the table, on that side, you know, maybe some kind of public safety firefighting workshop might be successful. That's just an idea. But I just want to make sure that we're taking a very active role, and I understand that we're going to be giving a report, and if we can work with our single commissioner, but I would just like to point out that I think that's very important to show, a show of force, and that priority is, that it is our priority.
Thank you. Bob, do you want to take a shot at a motion that you like?
Sure. I move that we send a letter back to the county telling them that we are choosing not to go forward any longer. However, this motion also includes that we as a council agree that we will start actively and not with words. We will start with this budget cycle, start setting aside a plan that within 5 years we obtain the objective of the Olson report. We can work in conjunction with the Public Safety Commission, we can work in conjunction with the firefighters and the chief, but we say that we will obtain their goals within a 5-year period. Unless we put it down and start today, we will never obtain it. And as long as we are well, that's my motion, then I'll discuss it later.
Active plan using increased income. Is that, no? Okay. Council, I don't know. Starbuck.
I was going to second it.
Okey doke. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am with you. When we're going through this budget process right now and we're looking at the next 2 years, it's very difficult for us to even pull out a dollar. So I think that a time frame is important. Deadlines are very important in being productive, but I'm afraid that the 5 years may be a little too short-sighted for the enormity of what needs to be done to meet those standards. And I personally myself have only reviewed that report. I haven't read it in full, so I can't even say if I believe right now 5 years is long enough to obtain that goal. So I think that I think that sounds great. I mean, having a 5-year plan, you know, that's motivating and all, but I guess with some kind of leeway is very important for me.
Councilmember Lingle.
Unfortunately, we've been having leeway for 10 years now. You know, for the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be really tight money-wise. If this was our budget in our home and we're working on a tight budget, but we knew we had to set aside for a college education, and we really wanted to do this. Not that if we can, we'll send our child to college, but we want to send our child to college, okay? We would find a way today to start setting aside $5, $10, $15, whatever it takes to obtain the goal that when our child graduates from high school, there's money available to go to college. If we say that we will do this if money is available, you know what? It's not going to be available. We have to start doing it today. So that is my motion, that we start today working with the Public Safety Commission, working with the firefighters, working with whomever we can to work with us, but say that within, and I'm picking 5 years, if someone wants to amend it to 5.5 years, I'll consider that. But time has been going on for so long right now that we have to put, you know, I guess put our mouth where our foot is.
Money where your mouth is.
There you go, yeah, thank you. So anyway, I think 5 years it's a goal, and I think we have to put it down on paper, say that we're going to obtain that goal. And you know what? When you put it down on paper, you can't obtain it. So I'm going to stick with my original motion.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't agree with you more that, you know, we have to take the first step, and the first step needs to start now. Understanding that increasing services in a recession means you will be decreasing services somewhere else. That's the reality. We all understand that that's how budgets work. So for me, it is a very intricate balance. However, knowing that the fire department and this issue is one of our priorities, therefore sets a precedent that we may, in fact, as a council, decrease some services to supplement the increasing of these services over the next 5 years. That's just the overall statement, but I agree with you. Something needs to be done. We need to take an active role.
I agree with you, and it may mean decreasing some services. But I think if you ask the public out here, you ask the public at home, if it means reducing our city by one park, if it means sweeping their street one less day a month to provide firefighters and paramedics to respond to your home when they're needed, I think every single citizen, 99% of the citizens would say, I'd rather have the firefighter paramedic at my home when I need them, when my house is burning down, when my child is suffocating to death, as opposed to having that extra park, my street swept. Yes, I agree that there's going to be some services that we're going to have to sacrifice. I believe, I'm speaking now for the citizens, I believe that they, if it comes to that, they will be willing to sacrifice that amount to come up with the amount of money that we need in 5 years. And it doesn't have to be reducing services immediately today. We may come up with our plan that, you know, this cycle, no, it's going to have to start today. I'm sticking by my original motion.
Okay, so let me talk about this a few minutes so my conscience will be much lighter. The very first thing that drew me into city politics was talking about ways we could save money to increase fire and police personnel. And by the way, I believe that when we talk about public safety, we talk about both fire and police, and we look at where our needs are. And I went to a great deal of work to develop a list of $1.1 million in savings. And the council at that time didn't choose to do that, and probably were fortunate, because then a budget crisis came along and most of those savings were used to balance the budget. Today we find ourselves with $1.7 million in a budget shortfall for 2 years, and we are again looking at things that we can cut. And I personally have difficulty talking about adding this when I'm still trying to figure out how to cut that. I'm very comfortable with the fact that if we have a revenue increase, that we should allocate that revenue increase in some formula to, number one, reducing our furloughs for everyone who have sacrificed, and number two, allocating a portion of that to the objectives that the Public Safety Commission identifies as first, second, third, fourth, etc. So I don't have any problem with that. I hate to vote for something that I don't believe I can make happen, and I'm not comfortable with the fact that I can make this happen. At the end of the day, if this is what you have to move this forward, then I will vote for it. But I don't have a good feeling in my heart that I'm going to be delivering what I'm promising, and that bothers me a great deal.
Well, I made the motion, it was seconded. I guess we call for a vote.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a final comment in regards to the Santa Barbara County proposal, and just understanding that in order to be a good steward of tax dollars, I cannot in good conscience approve this proposal as is, and with the county position currently where they're sitting, although maybe not unwilling to negotiate, needing to be cost neutral, I must choose that the option, or excuse me, recommendation C, that cost for services are not feasible at this time through the county proposal.
I agree with you completely. Is there any other further discussion on the motion? Then can we please vote? That passes 4-0 with one absent. Thank you very much. And next up, we have oral communications. Your golden opportunity to talk to us about anything you have in mind. But just for a quick second, let's everybody stand up and get a quick stretch, and then we'll go on to oral communications. Don't leave your seat. That's why I'm going. This chair doesn't work for me like my office chair. Another party. Okay, I see some of you starting to wander around. No wandering. Everybody sit down. No wandering. If you wander, we won't be able to have stretches anymore.
Did you just take them out of Cecilia's drawer?
I feel compelled to report that Councilmember Costa has filched Councilmember Martner's jelly beans, and she's sharing.
That's okay. I will leave then. I'm good for it.
Oh, my hands are sweaty and them beans.
Okay, now for oral communications and our first speaker.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Jason Reynolds, Lompoc Valley Chamber of Commerce. Here tonight just to give you a little bit of what we've been up to. Little summary here. First and foremost, we are currently in replacement mode. We're transitioning for a new CEO right now, and we have our openings that we've got out to numerous different areas, and we've got about 40 resumes currently in from a variety of locations and backgrounds. Our deadline is March 31st, and our goal is to have someone in place May 1st. We've been assisting the Santa Barbara Vintners Association with their April 16th festival that'll be held here at River Park. The Lompoc Valley and Bloom Committee and the city has really come together well to work on a cleanup effort of the entrance of the park. The Chamber's worked on promoting it through its website, and also you'll see some of the big wine bottle signs that are going up around town to promote it for the next month. We do have our Wine Trail directional signage project that we've been working on. These will be signs in 9 locations throughout the city, giving out-of-town folks and even folks in town an idea of where our wine ghetto exists, where downtown exists, and where the west side is. And those will be in the ground again on April 1st. Those are going in on a 60-day use permit currently, so we're going to be working on a permanent permit for those over those 60 days. Last, we've had Santa Barbara Youth Corps and quite a few other folks helping volunteering with the final stages of this, and we just had Valley Rock graciously donate the concrete and a truck for us, so we're really happy with that. We are currently in the preliminary stages of working with Buellton and Solvang, their chambers, on how to integrate some of our current services and promote some of the tourist-related activities, again, such as wine tasting, and that idea being kind of rotating some tours for the different towns to kind of tour each other's towns and kind of get an idea of what's out there. Our Old Town Market is coming back. We had a meeting this afternoon on that, and July 1st it will start for 10 weeks, ending on September 2nd. It will be down there in the original spot in downtown. We are in dire need of food vendors this year. It's one of the things that has slowly kind of backed off, and so food vendors and regular vendors, and obviously always sponsors. And so we'll be getting some more information about that out, but looking forward to that coming back there this year. We've prepared and provided input recently with the Workforce Investment Board through the county. We did a countywide survey that went through numerous employers here in town. The survey was set up to find out who will be experiencing layoffs, hiring, in need of assistance, and the final stages of that will be done very soon, and we'll be having a presentation on all of those findings. Some of our advertising, we've moved around a little bit. Some of the contractual pieces that the Chamber and the City have, working with some of the Westways and Sunset magazines over the last 2 quarters, we've changed that a little bit. We've been running a quarterly ad in the LA Times. They run a Central Coast section that we've plugged into with some of our local businesses and activities, and just trying to change that up a little bit. We are currently working on business development opportunities to promote and align our lodging and recreational activities. We've been meeting with various hotels, wineries, restaurants, transportation services, golf courses, and even Skydive Santa Barbara to really try to build a little more of alignment here with what our opportunities are. Our next chamber luncheon is very interesting. We have on March 31st at the Embassy Suites at 11:30. We have Mr. Mike Gibson, and Mike is the CEO of the Paso Robles Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to kind of have an opportunity to open up and get some ideas of how their community did what they've done over the last 10, 15 years up there. On April 1st, the Chamber will begin hosting a series of workshops called Business Success. The information and registration forms can be requested by calling our Chamber office at 736-4567. This will be a 6-week series, each Friday for about 3 hours. And last, there's always opportunity and services for small businesses that can come through the Chamber, and that's through the SBCD program. And again, you can contact the Chamber for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and really good news on the Old Town Market. Do you need more volunteers for that? Always. So you could come back and you could say how they get a hold of whoever's in charge of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please.
If just for the Old Town Market, you can reach the Chamber, just again, 736-4567. Dennis Hedrick there is kind of overseeing that so far, and he can definitely get you into the right direction. We have a lot of different ways you can volunteer, so appreciate it.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, Ken Austini.
Ken, because you stood up, does that make you an Old Town Market volunteer? Councilmember Starbuck wants to know.
Oh, well, let me, it's my time. We're on my time now. So.
Please reset Mr. Austini's time.
I won't take that long.
Give him his full time.
Again, I'm a lifelong resident of the Lompoc Valley and 14-year member of the Lompoc School Board. And I'm here to talk a little bit tonight about the Community Development Block Grant budget. It's going to be talked about tonight, and the Charlotte's Web project. I know that project's been talked about for a number of years. Money was allocated at one time for that project. Money was taken away from that project for other needs. And my concern is that from some things I've read, that there's a possibility if we don't do something with that project here in the very near future, that we could possibly lose the money from the trust that's been set aside. So I'm concerned that if we don't do something here soon to get that project moving, that we're going to lose that. And that's my concern. And to you tonight, to please try as best you can. I know money's tough, even with the CDBG monies, but please do what you can to get this project moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jane DeWeese, and I am a resident of the City of Lompoc. I also wanted to speak to you about Charlotte's Web this evening. I'm not only a parent, I'm a grandparent, I'm also a teacher and have been a teacher in Lompoc for 23 years. So Charlotte's Web is something that's of great importance to me because I know how important and vital it is to the children in our community. As I was looking at the guidelines for this particular grant, it said to provide public facilities that are energy efficient, conservation designed, to assist persons with special needs. It's a public service program to create and maintain jobs, provide assistance for revitalization and enhancement of low-income neighborhoods, to provide a neighborhood center or libraries. Charlotte's Web fits so many of these categories that it's so important also that this money come to our students. In particular because these monies are targeted for our low-income people. Many of our students come from low incomes. We have many homeless families who live in motels. They have no place to study. They have no computers. They have no access to computers. Many teachers stay after school for 45 minutes, an hour and a half working with children on their homework, but we cannot be there till 8 o'clock at night. These children need a place they can go where their parents can go and take them, where they can have access to materials, to stimulating ideas and concepts and activities that they don't get at home. Because we know as a community, as a nation, that it is education that helps people move out of the low income bracket. So if you want to do something not just for the present, but for the future of Lompoc, the future of this community, it truly is of vital importance that you consider funding Charlotte's Web, and not just that you consider it, but that you do it. Our children need it. I can see the looks on their faces when they enter a building, a structure that was meant just for them. When I go to the public library, I see adults, I see older students, a very good thing. I see very few children between the ages of about 6 and 14 there. This is a facility that targets them, targets their needs. And I can imagine no greater joy than being a member of the council that actually sees the funding of this property and the building of this facility go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Charles Arnold, a resident of Lompoc. Live right across the street from the proposed site. We haven't been able to get much sleep lately because Charlotte's been spinning in her grave so loudly that it's that constant whir. And so for the good of our sleep, Barbara and mine, get on with it. It's been way, way too long. We were completely dismayed when the decision was made to tear down the building that was there to fill in the swimming pool that had all kinds of possibilities as a reading nook. If we had used some, thought outside the box a little bit. Well, that's done, that's over with, but we need to do something now with this property that just sits there vacant, and she donated a good part of her life to the community, and so I would really like to see some of the funds made available for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
3 minutes left.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Anne Rouget, citizen of Lompoc. I'm also a new member of the Library Board of Trustees. I have two things. I think you did the right thing with the contract with the firefighters to stop the proceedings right now. I do appreciate Councilmember Lingel's comments about having a plan. And it's kind of interesting. If you go back and read the history of the Public Safety Commission, they're the ones that started a research on the police and fire, and they brought that to the council, and then we turned around and hired consultants to do the same thing, came back with the same ideas, same thoughts, same promotions, and the cost adjusted with it. And Mayor Lynn is right. It's very difficult if you don't have the funds to do it, because I believe the firefighter recommendation was a new one more shift, which would mean 6 firefighters, and then the police, there was to add 3 policemen and equipment and so on and so forth. So it will take a lot of money, but was always my priority was public safety also. And I'm going to tie that into the library, because one of the hearings I sat with, I believe it was Molly, who is our library director, talked about public safety. And a library does help with the public safety. We visit it all the time. That library is full most of the time of as Jane said, people from all different walks of life, all ages, and especially in these hard economic times. And we've been listening about Charlotte's Web for, I don't know, what, 5 years? It seems 10? 10. Oh, Lord. For 10 years. 14. I'll take 20. Anyway, 14 years. It's been a long time. And this is a time to set priorities and budgets and so on and so forth. And the CDBG money would fit right in with Charlotte's Web, and also the bond money if there is any left over. So I think you need to look at that and make that a priority also, because it does impact the community, and the more kids we get reading, the better this community is going to be. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Mayor Lynn, council members, citizens of Lompoc. My name's Dorian Hodge, and I, too, in addition to Mr. Arnold, live nearby where the location of Charlotte's Web is to be. I am a firm supporter of that project, and not only do I live nearly kitty corner to it, I live in Charlotte Benton's old condo, so I really feel her spirit moving. Charlotte was a wonderful, wonderful person, and I knew her from 1995 until her death in 2005. Because I was a next-door neighbor, I was living in the condo next to hers. I got to know her very well and started to, as I learned more about her past, started to share her dream for the library, the children's library. What a wonderful project it is. She was a visionary lady, so full of spirit, and what a fabulous way to enhance our city by having the children's library, but also to enhance and remember Charlotte Benton, who was one of our very, very strong women leaders in the past. I love the city of Lompoc. I retired from the military in 2005, and I moved to California because I love Lompoc. I love the downtown area, I love the whole city, and I just think that having the library at the location of the corner of Cypress and South I Street, it is just going to be such a jewel in our crown. So please put all your support behind the library, and it's time to bring this project to fruition. I thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you briefly about the Charlotte's Web Library. I'm Patricia Lo-Cicero, and I'm a teacher for the Lompoc School District. Everyone knows that we are having tight times and budgets must be cut. However, in the midst of all our financial problems lie our children, and it is challenging to know how we can best meet their needs. We all want our children to grow up to be responsible and well-educated citizens within our society. And I think the new library can be an important link in helping children to grow and learn. The Charlotte's Web Library will allow children on the south side of Lompoc time after school to be in a library. Children will be surrounded by books, and this access to books is one way literacy and a love of books are developed. This library can be a positive step towards securing a great future for our children, children who can grow up to be responsible and well-educated adults. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next.
Honorable Mayor, Council, thank you for having me here. I'm here to speak on Charlotte's Web. You know that I am not a public speaker.
But you have to tell us your name.
Excuse me?
You have to tell us your name.
Arlene Lewis.
Thank you.
So you know I'm not a public speaker. I always speak from the heart. I was asked to join the Library Foundation Board as a special events coordinator to put on, try to raise money for Charlotte's Web. So we had one that wasn't, I thought it was successful because we got the word out, but a lot of people didn't attend, bad timing. But This library has to be built because it belongs to Charlotte. Charlotte Benton had a dream for this library. I feel her spirit not even knowing her. And I walk past there, not a lot, but I can feel the strength of her saying, we need to get this building built. The Library Foundation is going to work hard, I promise you that. I'm sure I have people's back there to go ahead with this. We just need the CDBG money and the money that was promised from Charlotte Benton to get this library built. We have the plans, we have the people behind us, we have cards with people's names on them. I'm sure you all received them. So I just hope that we can get this library built for Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Mayor Lynn, council members, I'm Rita Madden, and I'm one of the trustees of the Charlotte Benton Trust. And I know that Charlotte would be really pleased to hear the comments that the previous speakers have all made. But I certainly agree with Chuck. I'm sure that he's hearing that screaming going on. For anyone who knows Charlotte, that would be the tone. But I truly am in support of this. I think it is time that we decide what we're going to do. The goal was there. The partnership of the city and the Charlotte Benton Trust and the Library Foundation have been in place now. And so it's time to either act on it or, of course, to see other options. But I don't think any of us want to see the other options. We want to see it move forward. So I support the application that the library has put forward, and I hope that you will look at it. And probably the one comment that some people may not be aware of is that this is a 1 or 2 time investment that you're making, and Charlotte has provided all of the funding for the operation of this library for the next 18 to 20 years. So certainly that is not an ongoing cost to you in any way. So thank you very much for your attention to this.
Rita, I'm wondering if you would give me a call and give me a little education on this, because I'm not too deep into it yet. Appreciate that. Thank you. Is there any other council member that would like to get a little education on this subject? You could mention it now. Or maybe you guys are all up on it. I know I'm not. So, okay. Who else would like to speak? Okay. Seeing no one rise, we'll close oral communication. Oh, sorry. Missed you on the far side.
I sat too far away. My name is Lisa Rankin-Carucci. I'm the director of the Lompoc Museum, but I'm speaking tonight as a resident of Lompoc and as a parent. I support the use of the community development block grants for Charlotte's Web construction, just like all the other speakers have. Having a children's library on the south side of Lompoc, I feel that would just be such a great asset to the old town area and its revitalization, as well as a great resource for the children of Lompoc. It's within easy walking distance of 4 schools in the area. 2 of my children attend schools, 2 of those schools, so I know that they're going to be out of those schools before this is built, but it would have been a great thing for them to have, and I just know that it would be a great asset for all the children coming up. With the challenges that our schools are facing right now, I think that Charlotte's Web would just be a real boon to increasing our students' performance, but also just to their quality of life. As a firm advocate for culture and education within our community, I just think that Charlotte's Web would be a wonderful asset, and I really hope that we can move forward on this. And I was especially gratified to hear that if the trust has also taken care of the operational cost, knowing that this is a capital cost and it's a 1 or 2 time cost, I think really should help make the decision easier. So I just like to throw my support behind it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name is Barbara Holt. I'm a citizen of Lompoc, and I am the other trustee of the Benton Trust, and I have been and will at any time be available to answer any questions that either you as the council have or any of the public has. I mean, we're not trying to be quiet or sneaky about what we're doing. It's upfront what we've done. We've taken the assets, and we do have, some of them are liquid at this time, so that there is money available to pay for the operations and the utilities of the building, but there's not the money to build it. So if you come up with some form that it can be built, you know that it's going to be paid. It's not going to come out of your budget. So if you have any questions or any of the public does, we'll be glad to answer, either Rita or myself.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one rise, for sure, we'll close public testimony and we'll come back to the council for our consent calendar. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe this might be a question for City Attorney or City Administrator. I have a question on one of the consent calendar items. Do I need to pull it to ask the question, or can I just ask a general question?
You can ask a question.
Okay. Then as I guess the most likely Charles Height is not here, but I have a question about consent calendar item number 5, the traffic signal. City Administrator? Is this a question that I would direct towards you? Because it's about consent calendar item 5, the traffic signal, State Route 246, and our street.
I'm looking to see if we have Larry Bean. Oh, Mr. Bean is on his way in, and that he would be the appropriate person to ask the question.
Wonderful, thank you.
Step right up to the microphone.
My apologies.
And your question?
It's a very simple question, actually. I noticed that there will be quarterly reports from the city in order to fulfill a Caltrans requirement to meet certain benchmarks. Is that correct?
Item 5, the traffic signal.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Consent calendar item 5, the traffic signal on 246 in our street.
I don't know. I'm sure Kevin would be better equipped to answer that question. I'm just kidding.
Good evening. I should have jumped up. Sorry about that. Just for the record, I'm Kevin McCune, Assistant Public Works Director, City Engineer. Council member, I believe what those are referring to is there's new Caltrans requirements for reporting that came online with the ERA funds, and there are quarterly reports that it's like a web-based thing that we have to update our progress on the project. So that's what that is referring to.
Perfect. And so then I don't know if I'm allowed to request that we get those updates as well, even though it's within the consent calendar. Is that something that you can bring to council?
Absolutely.
Just so we know how that's going, because I know I'm asked about projects all the time, and so knowing that makes it much easier, or even at least in a memo form, either way.
Sure.
Thank you. And with that, I move that we accept the consent calendar.
I'll go ahead and second it.
And I report that I abstained from check number 297055. Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to comment on item number 7, the modification of the NCPA Germothermal and Facilities Agreement. I had some real concern, or had some concerns about that when I first read it, but after meeting with Mr. Stassi and staff, they have alleviated my concern. My concern was having someone, a member, pull out of NCPA and still receive benefits from the geothermal project. And also my concerns were potential liabilities that would be that the city of Turlock would no longer have, and would those liabilities then be assessed to other members? I was assured that they would not be assessed to other members. They would go back to the original members that Turlock obtained their rights from. So there's no additional cost to the city of Lompoc on this. So I just wanted to let you know that it is okay with me that we approve that.
Is there any further discussion on the consent calendar? It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Can we vote, please? That passes 4-0 with one vacant or one absent. And now we go to our public hearing item. Comment on the Caltrans Engineering and Traffic Survey for Highway 1 from Hancock Drive to George Miller Drive, which is the entrance road for the airport. Our Assistant Public Works Director, Kevin McCune.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and the public. On March 3rd, 2011, the city received notification from Caltrans that they have completed a speed zone study for a section of Highway 1 from 800 feet north of Hancock Drive to 600 feet south of George Miller Drive. Preliminary results indicated a reduction in speed for both the northbound and the southbound directions. City traffic engineering staff and the Lompoc PD have reviewed the request and support the change. Attached to the staff report is the letter from March 3rd, the engineering and traffic survey, and an exhibit that I asked Caltrans to prepare to show where the new speed zones would be located. Roger is, I believe, here tonight. Roger? Ah, there he is. Roger Barnes is here from Caltrans. He did prepare the study and is available to answer any questions you would have. So the recommendation tonight is to hold a public hearing, provide comment on the Caltrans Engineering and Traffic Survey for Highway 1 from Hancock Drive to George Miller Drive.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I can't help myself. I think it's a good idea, but I'm wondering if this is the same guy that invented the roundabout on 246.
I can't answer that. He's saying no.
I'm pretty sure the guy that invented the roundabout on 246 wouldn't be here, no. Matter of fact, I'm positive of that. Does anyone else have a question before we open this to public comment? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will we be receiving the presentation from Caltrans?
I don't believe Roger has prepared a presentation, but would you like to come up? Yes. Okay, if council
Just
would like.
briefly, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, city residents, my name is Roger Barnes, that's B-A-R-N-E-S with Caltrans. My role with Caltrans is to prepare engineering and speed zone surveys. Basically what we have before you tonight is an update to the engineering and speed zone survey for the 55 mile per hour speed limit that exists between George Miller Drive and Hancock Drive. Part of the requirements that the state has to comply with is if once we do the survey, if we feel there's a justification to lower it or raise it, we're required to bring it before you for input from the residents as well as yourselves. I'll give you a little background on some changes that came into effect as of 2009, July 1st, 2009. The two major requirements were prior to 2009, you would take the 85th percentile speed, and the language said should raise it to the next 5 mile per hour increment, and then you would reduce it 5 miles per hour if there was a justification for doing so. In 2009, the wording went to it shall be raised to the next 5 mile per hour increment, and then you had to have a licensed civil or traffic engineer sign off on the 5 mile per hour reduction. So that's what we've done. Now, the key point I want to bring to you tonight is on that 5 mile per hour reduction. We took it for the whole area because in looking at the collision history, we were near the statewide average. However, 70% of those accidents were related to speed. So there was a red flag right there that it's probably in the best interest to reduce it 5 miles per hour. So in taking those two components into consideration, the recommendation was the 55 mile per hour coming into town, we couldn't lower it until the last half mile segment. So you have a 45 mile per hour transition. So you have 55, 45, then into the 35. Now going out of town, the 85ths were low enough to where we could go up to 55 and then round and then drop it down 5 miles per hour. So the recommendation was to go to 35, 50, then 65 outside of town. So that's how we arrived at that recommendation. And to complete this survey, it's very important that we consider your residents, what they have to say and what you have to say about that. So we wouldn't want you to just wake up one morning and see the signs change. So that's kind of why I'm here tonight, is to get your feedback. So I have any other questions, I can answer them.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that explanation. I guess my question is, you adjust the speeds based on, well, you mentioned the number of accidents in a location, and the number of accidents were primarily caused by, I think you said 70%.
Speed related.
Speed related, yes.
High speed rear ends is
right, high speed. So what was the speed? The speed limit in that area was 55 at the time?
55, correct.
55. So what was the speed? Was it 80 miles an hour, or was it maybe at 60 miles an hour?
Well, the 85th in that area was 57. The collision reports we get don't tell us what they are, but with a 85th percentile of 57 miles per hour, 85 vehicles are in a 100 vehicle survey, 185 vehicles are traveling at 57 or below, so there's 15 that are traveling above 57. So that kind of gives you an idea where they're at. So all they come in is, the primary cause is speed.
Yeah, because, obviously I'm not an expert in this, but it would seem like accidents that are caused by high speed would be more than accidents are caused by cars going more than 5 miles an hour. It'd be cars going at 15, 20 miles above the speed limit.
Right, they just don't code it. They just say speed related. They don't, speed related rear end, inattentive driving, things like that. They don't, I could research. What we can do is we can always go back through the records through each one and see what they were doing. We can do that. That's always a possibility. But typically they just say speed. That was the primary cause of the collision, was speed. So when I do the surveys, I look, if I have a location that's at the statewide average, but there's hardly any speed-related collisions, it's probably not a good justification to reduce that 5 miles per hour. But since there's such a high percentage of speed-related collision, it's a good indication that there are conditions not readily apparent to the driver, because a lot of these occurred in no unusual conditions. So,
yeah. Okay, because I think I'm like probably most people. Chief, close your ears. Speed limit's 55. I'll set my cruise control at 60.
Correct.
Okay, knowing that I'm a friend of Chief Dabney and he'll never. No. So I mean, in that case, if I have an accident, it's really caused by speeding, and I'm only doing 58 miles an hour. So
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how they code it. That's whenever the officer took the report, when it went up to Sacramento and everything was coded in the system, it came back speed related.
Okay, and for the record, Chief Dabney said he would ticket me if I did that.
Councilmember Costa, and then Sergeant Lardner can come to the podium next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, you mentioned this, but I wanted to clarify for the public, and as well to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, that in the corridor that we're speaking of here, which is from, George Miller Drive to Hancock Drive.
Correct.
There are actually a total number of collisions lower than the national state average.
Correct. It's just,
right. Right. So it's the next corridor then that presented 188 cases of accidents, and that's about 3.4 times higher than the national state average. And that then is the reason why you want to change these speeds.
A combination of both, Council Member Costa. Coming into town, that 35 was completed in 2006, and it has a statewide average that is several times higher than a typical facility. The number of speed-related collisions in there is a little under 50%. So we do have, and we had, I believe, 6 pedestrian collisions, as well in that corridor. So the idea is that, we want to transition the vehicles into that 35 mile per hour zone. So that was the justification for that transition of 45. Now going out of town, the 50, we looked predominantly at the area between George Miller Drive and Hancock Drive, which is coming up the hill, is primarily where a lot of the high-speed rear ends are taking place. So we looked at both areas. I like to look at both areas to see if there's what type of collisions are within the facility.
Perfect. And the last comment I wanted to make is I wanted to clarify for the public as well that this isn't necessarily just, well, it is a precaution measure, but that's because you're seeing actual fatalities occur in certain instances.
Not necessarily fatalities.
Well, there was not for the corridor itself,
Right.
but those two outside of the corridor that we're trying to limit the speeds within to then limit those accidents outside of.
Right.
Correct? So it looks like there were 6 actually within that 3-year period, or I'm
six pedestrian.
Oh, pedestrian, excuse me.
Auto versus pedestrian.
It says fatalities. That's odd.
So yeah, that's one thing we consider. It was also, adequate bike and ped facilities and speed differentials, which is high speed versus low speed vehicles, things like that as well. But primarily in this corridor, there appears to be a lot of speed related issues. So that's why we went and looked at the 35 mile per hour zone as well to see what that pattern was, to see if a 45 transition zone would be beneficial or not. And so we felt it would be beneficial to slow those speeds down coming into town. Coming out of town, it's 50 the whole way. We were able to get the 85s were pretty reasonable to bring it down. And we, like I said before, we had a large amount of speed related collisions in that corridor. So I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I wanted to correct myself. I was looking at injuries and then the total. So there was injuries, but no fatalities. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for our friend from Caltrans? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate staff putting this on the agenda, and I'll be staying around to take comments and all that. Thank you very much.
I think it's just perfect that not only were you our traffic officer, but you're now our public information officer. And I know you'd like to say something about the collisions in this area because you and I have discussed it. So here's your golden moment to talk about how you perceive the problem and this is a solution.
For those of you who aren't aware, I'm Sergeant Lardner, Lompoc Police Department. I'm traffic supervisor, former motor traffic investigator for the last 12 years or so. Part of my responsibility at the police department is reviewing just about every single traffic accident report that we complete. Not approving it, but at least reviewing it. So I have a good idea of where we're having traffic accidents at, what are causing the traffic accidents in our city, where we should be deploying extra enforcement, where we should be putting our message board, our radar trailer, where we should be doing our DUI checkpoints, DUI saturation patrols, anything traffic related. It's part of my responsibility. That's what they rely on me to do. To answer Councilman Lingel's question about the speed, you're talking about speed over the speed limit of 55 miles an hour for a traffic accident. How we code the traffic accidents, an easy example is if you're going up, we're all familiar with 8th Street, you're passing the drive-in, and you're going north towards the Y. All the traffic stops on the top. Well, the traffic behind is starting to slow down. Everybody's hitting their brakes very quickly. They're all slowing down. Maybe some are doing 20, 25 miles an hour. But the person who's following too closely or who isn't paying attention, texting, doing whatever it is they're doing, isn't slowing down quick enough, and they rear end the car that's in front of them. Their speed may only be 10 or 15 or 20 miles an hour, but the car in front of them was either stopped or slowing down. So their speed is unsafe for the conditions. Their speed should have been 0 in order to avoid the traffic accident. So even though the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, if you're doing 10 miles an hour and you fail to see that the car in front of you is stopped, you rear end them, it's unsafe speed for the conditions. There's another section that we typically use. It's following too closely, tailgating. Now, we don't use that very often because we can't prove it, because we're not there to actually witness it, unless we have some type of independent witness. If we do have an independent witness that says, yes, this person was tailgating, following too closely, the person in front of them hit their brakes, the person behind them didn't have time to stop and rear-ended them, then we might code it as an following too closely. But majority of our traffic collisions that are rear-end collisions are unsafe speed for the conditions. So if a person is stopped in front of you and you lean over to adjust the radio, do whatever it is, you take your eyes away from the roadway, and you again hit somebody, unsafe speed for the conditions. That's why You might only have an accident at 15 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone, but it's still, that's where they come up with the speed is unsafe for the conditions. So that's it. Good answer.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? Okay, we'd like to open this now for public comment. Who would like to speak on this subject? Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, seeing no one rise, we'll bring it back to council for further discussion. Anyone have something they'd like to discuss further? Or if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept staff recommendations.
And a second?
I'll go ahead and second it.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded that we accept staff recommendation with regard to this. Is there any further discussion? And could we vote, please? That passes 4-0 with one absent. Okay, our next item is unfinished business, and it deals with the award of the contract to Broad Spec Inc. for building division services. As many of you know, I'm involved in some projects that are in the building department in the city, and one of them in particular has had issues, and I think a letter that was received by the building owner last Friday resolves that. But my little conscience on the inside says that for right now, until that issue is resolved, I don't feel comfortable voting on this, and I spoke to Council Member Lingle earlier, so I'm going to go recluse myself to the lobby on this issue, and you shouldn't read anything into it other than making my conscience feel good.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Mr. McCune will give us a staff report.
Thank you. I guess it would be thank you, council members and public. For the record, my name is Kevin McCune, Assistant Public Works Director, City Engineer. Staff has been working on this issue for a little over a year now. February 6, 2010 is where the City Council held a budget workshop. City Administrator recommended the Building Division services be contracted out. The recommendation was approved, and the City Administrator and the Council, City Administrator directed the Fire Department to advertise for the necessary services. And then a little over a month ago, the direction was reiterated at the February 10th, 2011 budget workshop, where the City Council directed staff to complete negotiations and return with a contract for City Council consideration. So just to back up a little bit, how we got here was the city advertised for a request for qualifications, received 9 submittals for building division services, created a short list of the top 5 consultants, and then invited them for formal interviews. After formal interviews and a thorough evaluation, staff selected Broad Spec Incorporated as the top-ranked proposal. Broad Spec is made up of engineers, architects, plan reviewers, and building officials and inspectors. Broad Spec has significant depth of experience providing plan review, inspections to building departments throughout the western United States. The reason the evaluation committee chose Broad Spec was their approach to providing customer service. Their proposal and interviews demonstrated that they clearly understood the City Council's desire to reinvent the building division with a business-friendly attitude and focus. We've heard that over and over again at various meetings. A couple things that stood out to us. Their motto is facilitation, not regulation. A quote from their proposal said that we continue, I am quoting, we continue to seek ways to say yes, to keep projects moving and people happy. We know how to apply flexibility and common sense so that working by the book doesn't preclude satisfying the customer. Staff thinks that this is what the City Council is looking for from the building division. Broad Spec's contract is performance-based. They're required to provide the necessary staffing to meet contractual performance benchmarks. They're required to provide a full-time services to the city Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. few examples of the performance benchmarks in the contract are when inspections are requested, they will be performed the next day. If an inspection has failed, the broad spec will provide a re-inspection the same day if requested. Plan review for room additions less than 500 square feet will be performed within 3 business days. Plan review for new structures will be completed within 7 days and resubmittals within 5 days. A complete list of all the performance benchmarks are included in the contract at the very end of the package, entitled Broad Specs Guarantee of Excellent Customer Service. Broad Spec will be paid a percentage of city permit revenue. This is a sliding scale based on the amount of work we give them. And the table is in the staff report as well as the contract. The percentages go from a high of 80% for the lower amount of work, and as we give them more work, those percentages go down to a low of 50%. There is a minimum monthly payment of $10,500, no matter how much work we give them. The broad spec contract includes an additional 5% per project discount for projects that are submitted paperless. They have an in-house method to accept plan checks electronically over the web. Broad spec will provide all staff, tools, materials, and vehicles necessary to perform the building division services, including plan review, inspection, and code enforcement related to the building and housing codes. The city will provide office space and computers for broad spec staff, as well as 1 full-time development services assistant for front counter support. If approved, the contract begins April 4th of this year, 2011. The contract will continue for 3 years, followed by 2 optional 2-year extensions. The city can terminate without cause with 6 months prior notice. In the event of default by broad spec, the city can terminate immediately. In attendance tonight is the proposed Lompoc building official, Harry Hinton. There's a Harry right there in the front row. And also Terry Knox, the broad spec vice president, right next to him. So they're available also tonight if you'd like to ask them some questions. The finance department prepared a cost comparison table for the February 10th budget workshop, where the costs for various staffing options were compared. The table was attached to the staff report if you'd like to review that information. But just to summarize what it says, based on the 2009-10 level of permit activity, the negotiated broad spec contract is estimated to save the general fund approximately $225,000 per year when compared with the existing approved budget. Recently, last week, we had the single purpose committee was met for the second time. They had the opportunity to review the staff report and the contract, and they did end up endorsing the recommendation. I believe there's someone here tonight to speak on their behalf. So the recommendation before you tonight is to award a contract service to broad spec and authorize the mayor to execute the necessary agreements, direct staff to eliminate the building official and senior building zoning inspectors from the budget, authorize the management services director to prepare a budget adjustment as necessary to fund the contract utilizing salary savings. And one final item is if you approve the contract, I would ask that you would make a change to item 3C in the contract. The second sentence in that section 3C says the building official will attend monthly development review board meetings. It was pointed out to me that these meetings can be monthly, can be more often than monthly and less often than monthly. So what I'd like to do is strike out monthly. And so it just reads, the building official will attend development review board meetings, and then on for the rest of the sentence. So strike the word monthly. I've talked to broad spec about this, and they agreed to the change. With that, I'll conclude my staff report and am available for any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Starbuck.
Mr. McCune, I'd like to say you nailed it on the head when you said that that's exactly what the council wants, is a business-friendly environment, and I love the mission statement that you guys put in here. It sold me.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingle, and thank you, gentlemen, for attending. Thank you for the staff report. I have a few questions. So I understand that it's considerable savings for the city, about $225,000. But my curiosity becomes the customer or the individual utilizing these services. Is there going to be any differential for them, any increase in prices or lowering of prices?
No, the master fee schedule would not change with this proposal. So the fees in effect at the time prior to adopting this would stay in effect after adopting it.
Okay, I think that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, we will now open it up for public comment.
Council members, my name is Jim Dixon. I have a local engineering business in town. You, several weeks ago, appointed a single-purpose committee to look at possible ways of streamlining the development process in Lompoc, and I was appointed to that committee. The chairman of that committee, Jim White, is unable to attend tonight and asked me to attend and say just a few words. The committee has reviewed the contract. We've talked to Kevin regarding how it's going to function, and so we've had a complete briefing on it. And the statement they wished me to read was, the single-purpose committee endorses the broad spec contract concept and believes that this is a first positive step in streamlining the development process within the city of Lompoc by addressing quality and improving the customer experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Would anyone else like to say a few words? Okay, then we'll bring it back to the council. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingle, and thank you very much for coming up and speaking. I think it's key that we get the commissions more involved, so coming up and giving that report is really appreciated. So I guess my one discussion for the council members is part of paying a fee for a service is paying for the cost of that service. So I do think that if we are getting savings, percentage of that should be also to decrease the cost of that service, or is that?
Well, remember, we're paying a minimum of...
Understood, right, right.
So I think if there is a month where we happen to make a few extra dollars, it'll go towards the months that we don't make anything.
Is that an accurate projection?
Actually, this service is losing money, lots of money right now. So when we say it's going to cost $225,000 less than that we're saving that much, we were losing $400,000, $450,000 a year on it. So there's not any extra money to lower fees. It's just we're losing less using the consulting firm.
Thank you.
That answers that question, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. If there's no more comments, I'd like to have someone, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I move that we award the contract to Broad Spec Inc. for the building division services.
I will second that.
Any discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote. That passes 3 with 2 abstentions. And Mr. McEwen.
Just for clarification, did that also include the change to the contract?
Yes, my apologies.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll invite the mayor back.
Thank you. My conscience is now clear. It's a good thing. Okay. Next up, we have item 10, the continued suspension of the AB 1600 development impact fees for street improvements, and our Community Development Director, Arlene Pelster.
Thank you, Mayor. In December 15th of 2009, the Council adopted a resolution suspending collection of the street improvement fee. It was determined at the time that it may have been an impairment to new projects, and this effort was intended to assist developers in assembling viable construction financing plans. This suspension would expire at the end of the month unless the Council gives alternate direction tonight to continue suspending the fee. We are closing in on completion of the first phase of our general plan update. We're hoping to do that in the next 6 months. Street improvements for the updated general plan may differ from those that are in our current general plan, and after the new plan is adopted, the staff will review the street improvement fee and recommend revision of that fee. We do feel that it's appropriate to continue the suspension at this time. Under the fiscal impact, if the Council continues to suspend the fee, then funds will not be collected toward the 3 street improvements that are outlined in the staff report. However, it's important to note that these improvement projects are not yet needed. Service levels for the affected intersections are currently in compliance with our general plan, and these projects are not under construction. Therefore, we also would like to note that we will continue to collect the traffic signal impact fee. This is just the street improvement fee for those large improvements. Therefore, we recommend that you receive the staff report and provide direction to staff. If you do determine tonight to continue the fee suspension, we have prepared a draft resolution number 5704(11), which would allow us to continue suspension of the collection of the street improvement fee. And this concludes my report. I'm available for questions.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Pelzer, it's stated in there that the reason we suggested this was to hopefully get new businesses to start building even during this time of economic distress. The ones listed here, I guess Panda Express, McDonald's are the commercial ones that, was there any indication when they came forward that the impact fees had any impact on them?
No, none of them came directly forward and said, were it not for this fee suspension, we would not have proceeded with this project. I do remember it was problematic for the McDonald's expansion when they were weighing the size of the expansion versus the cost of the fee. But I think these projects were all in the process when the fee was suspended, and none of them indicated that that was the defining point for them proceeding.
Okay. Were there any businesses in discussion since we suspended them that came forward and said, this really is attractive,
After the Council suspended the fee, I sent a letter out to all the developers who are active in the community and architects and engineers, making them aware that we did have this fee suspension. And while I did receive phone calls from several developers saying, wow, this is a great step for the city to take, you're understanding what we're up against, it did not actually turn into a project that they proceeded with at that time.
Okay. Even though I am in favor of continuing this suspension, if this has really not met my objection anyway, objective, why would you recommend us continuing it?
Because we are going to be revising it when the new general plan is adopted.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I was waiting for you to call me Ashley.
Go ahead, Cecilia.
What are we going to revise? Are we going to revise the impact fee study or the amount that we're charging on the...
Okay, I'm going to look to Larry Bean on this.
Yeah, what is the change that we're going to do in the general plan?
To discuss how we're going to change the fee structure.
We have a general plan circulation element that you will approve sometime shortly. And yes, it's in the circulation element. In that, there may or may not be some of the improvements that were in the old general plan. So we'll reevaluate the value of the work that needs to be done in the future based on the traffic needs, and we'll apply that across the potential new development on all the vacant lots in whatever area you finally designate as the new limits for building. If you have something to annex, then that'll be included in it. There may be more traffic, maybe less, to divide it out. So we would calculate a new fee, hopefully.
And the follow-on to that is then that fee is the one that's used, or that aggregate total is the one that's used in the AB 1600 analysis that drives the fees at the end of the day.
Correct.
Thank you. For the audience, there's a state law called AB 1600, and it dictates how impact fees are charged, and each segment of it is different, and the one that drives that traffic impact fee is what we determine in our circulation element from our general plan. Are there more questions? Okay. Now for public questions. Who would like to speak on this issue?
My name is Wiki Rodenhigh. Just as a matter of note, there is a line item in the budget for Charlotte's Web for traffic impact fees. At the moment, $50,000 in funding for traffic impact fees being set aside is included in that budget. If you do away with it, then the project needs another $50,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Does anyone else would like to speak on this subject? Seeing no one rise, we'll return it to the council, who would like to either discuss this further or make a motion. Councilmember Starbuck.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. I make a motion that we adopt resolution number 5704, parentheses 11, continuing the suspension of collection of the developmental impact fee for street improvements.
And is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
I think you got your button down first. I'm sorry, I have to rule you out of order. Councilmember Costa got her button down first. Okay, she defers to you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, if not, could we go ahead and vote, please? And that passes 4-0 with one absent. And next will be item 11, the proposed budgets for the Community Development Block Grants, CDBG, Human Services, Home Investment Partnership, Home Programs, and we have our Community Development Program Manager, Dinah Lockhart.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, and residents of Lompoc. I'm here this evening to present the 2011-2012 proposed budgets for the Community Development Block Grant Program, Human Services, and Home Investment Partnership Programs, and the adoption of Resolution Number 569811. The recommendations are that the City Council receive public testimony, direct staff to make any changes, and adopt Resolution 569811, approving the fiscal year 2011-12 budget for the CDBG, Human Services, and Home Program funds for inclusion in the draft Santa Barbara County Home Consortium CDBG Urban County Partnership Action Plan for 2011-2012, which will be posted for a 30-day public comment period beginning on March 25th, 2011, and ending on April 24th, 2011. At the conclusion of the public comment period, the action plan will be forwarded to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and also we're asking that Council approve and authorize the city administrator or her designee to sign any agreements or certifications that authorize the city to receive these funds. Initially, I just wanted to point out in one of the attachments in the back, it's the resolution number 1, attachment number 1. It references an Exhibit A that was inadvertently left out of your packet. However, attachment A, or Exhibit A, is actually the budget worksheet, and that is in your packet. So the budget worksheet is actually attachment number 2, and I also have an enlargement of that in case that was difficult to read. It was rather small when it copied. The city receives an annual allocation of federal funding from the Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Affordable Housing Program. These federal funds are received from Santa Barbara County through 2 consortium agreements. Since 1994, the city has been a member of the Home Consortium, along with the county and the cities of Buellton, Carpinteria, Goleta, Santa Maria, and Solvang. In 2007, the city joined the county, Carpinteria, Buellton, and Solvang to form the CDBG Consortium. Just very briefly, for those who are not familiar with these programs, the intent of the HOME program is to provide decent, affordable housing to lower-income households, to expand the capacity of nonprofit housing providers, to strengthen the ability of state and local governments to provide housing, and to leverage private sector participation. The primary objective of the CDBG program is the development of viable urban communities by providing the following objectives: decent housing, a suitable living environment, and expanded economic opportunities. Both the CDBG and HOME programs must show a benefit to low and moderate income persons as defined by HUD. Some of the eligible uses of this funding includes maintaining and upgrading existing low-income affordable housing stock, support the rehabilitation of public facilities and affordable housing that incorporates energy efficiency and conservation design measures, to promote and provide services that assist persons with special needs, to support public service programs for low and moderate income households, to support economic development that creates and retains jobs, including those for low and moderate income persons, to provide assistance for revitalization and enhancement of low-income neighborhoods and communities by improving their physical character, to provide assistance to low-income neighborhoods by funding critical community facilities. Last year, the city's CDBG division oversaw the expenditure of approximately $736,000. Accomplishments last year include the allocation of $160,000 to 19 local agencies, the investigation of 80 CDBG code enforcement cases and the resolution of 44 cases, the initiation of 4 housing rehabilitation loan projects and managing a loan portfolio of 56 loans, assisting the engineering division in the preparation of request for proposals for the new senior community center and the library HVAC project, to provide staff support to the city's Human Service Commission, and the reservation of $1 million in federal home affordable housing funds for 2 proposed housing developments, which are Cypress Courts Senior Apartments and Santa Rita Village Apartments. Figures contained in the following budget discussion in staff's report are based on the city receiving a status quo grant award, which is approximately equal to last year's grant. The city and county's CDBG budgets must be submitted to HUD 45 days before the start of the program year, which is July 1, which is why Council is being asked to adopt the provisional budget prior to receiving a final grant amount. Staff's report details proposed expenditures in administration, capital projects, code enforcement, housing economic development revolving loan fund program, housing development, public facilities, and the human services program. In summary, staff is requesting that City Council receive public testimony, direct staff to make any changes, and adopt resolution number 569811 and the provisional 2011-2012 CDBG Home and Human Services Program budget. Any public comments or written correspondence received by either the city or county as a result of today's meeting or during the 30-day public notice period will be forwarded to HUD with the budget document. And I'm available to answer any specific questions that council might have. That ends my presentation.
Okay, who'd like to be first? Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Larkart, thank you for your report. I'm looking at the spreadsheet, the 2011-2012 action plan. If I'm reading this right, we heard a lot of testimony tonight about Charlotte's Web. On this, you're not recommending anything for Charlotte's Web then?
No, I'm not at this time.
Okay. Up near the top right under capital projects, there's 281,000 undesignated.
Yes.
Okay. Undesignated, so there's no set purpose for that at this point?
No. At this point, I'm waiting, or this is money that council can direct for proposed projects. Some of those proposed projects, which I've indicated, include Charlotte's Web Children's Library. There was a request submitted by the County Public Health Department for Lompoc Animal Service Shelter ADA improvements. There are also a number of other projects that the council could potentially designate those funds to, or not designate them at all. So it's really council's direction on how they would like to use that money. And at this point, I did not make a recommendation.
Okay. And then under affordable housing, the 815 West Ocean, you're recommending 210,000. Same.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what that 210 would be for.
This $210,000 represents what is currently being estimated would be the city's grant under the Home Affordable Housing Program. So this is not CDBG funding.
Okay.
This is home funding, and it must be designated for some type of affordable housing use. We are recommending that it be allocated to the project, which is Santa Rita Apartments, which is being developed by Surf Development, which is the housing authority of Santa Barbara County. And they're building some 55 new family affordable units on the west end of town.
Okay. In looking at your recommendations, there's nothing that stands out that I'd say take away from any of these. I mean, you've got $200,000 for code enforcement. I believe that is something that we're really we're telling the city to move forward with. Possibly the $40,000 for the Catholic Charities repair grant, that, good project, so I'm not going to recommend that. But I would like to see us tonight commit some of the $281,000 undesignated. Consider that for Charlotte's Web. Some of that. That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a really general question. I know that we're going off of the idea that we would continue with the CDBG consortium, although I did read in the report that the city may reapply to HUD for its entitlement status. What are the benefits to that, or are there any, or is it currently better for us to stay with the consortium agreement?
I guess you could say that there are advantages and disadvantages for both approaches. We initially entered the consortium agreement for the first 3 years because the county made it financially attractive for the city to do so. We signed up for another 3 years because we felt at this time the county's administration of the city's overall administration with HUD would alleviate or reduce some of the workload on staff. Quite frankly, I've not found that to be so. While the county has provided some administrative oversight and some go-between between HUD, it actually it's created another administrative layer for us, quite frankly. So I can't really say that there would be an advantage in continuing with the consortium relationship. It's certainly something that we could explore with the county and come back to council to give you perhaps at least provide the county's response. But the city did very well as an independent entitlement community for probably well over 25 years.
Right.
So it's certainly something that we could go back to.
So the reason I mention that is because it's very difficult for me to make this decision tonight without knowing the cost or benefit of that initial decision. If it is and so maybe I actually don't really care to hear what the county response is, although, I mean, I'm always open for more information, but it's our stance as a city, what benefits the city most, being in the consortium agreement or as an individual entitlement. So for that reason, I think tonight I would have to abstain from any decision-making simply because I'm curious, to preclude this decision with that information.
One thing I would like to clarify, and perhaps it wasn't clear in the report, the city is in the consortium arrangement now. So the budget that is being recommended is a budget that we are submitting to the county, which will be included in their action plan, which will then be submitted to HUD. So tonight's decision does not involve whether or not the city will remain in the consortium. We're simply preparing a budget for submission to the county. However, I can come back later in the year to discuss with council the option of applying for the city's entitlement status again.
And when would that application take place?
It would happen sometime in this current fiscal year 11-12.
Okay, but I think I may have misunderstood that the impact of that would not occur until 2012, 2013.
That's correct.
Okay, so these decisions to be made this evening, are outside of any change that may occur that way.
That's right.
Okay, so thank you. I retract that previous statement. And the other question I had was in regards to the housing development. As Councilmember Lingle mentioned, that's $210,000 for 815 West Ocean Avenue. And I was curious within these two projects where they were within the city process, because there was one report I had gotten, it may have been a few months back, and I may not have seen the newest, where one of these projects had stalled or hadn't made any steps forward, and that's the other that you were actually saying shouldn't be given that 210. That was the the 60-unit senior and disabled affordable housing.
Right, Cypress Courts.
Right, and so I was under the impression that had been stalled recently, or maybe not stalled is not the right word, but there wasn't significant action taken. And I was curious about where within the process, within the city, are these two projects currently located? Is there a reason why you chose one over the other, I guess, is what I'm getting to?
Yes, I've actually been in contact with both developers. And both projects are applying for low-income housing tax credits in March. But they've also had discussions amongst themselves, the two developers. And I believe that the Housing Authority's project is a little farther along in the development path. If you were to drive down West Ocean Avenue now, you'll see construction going on at their site. I believe that they're first working on replacing their administrative offices. So they've actually begun at least some of the preliminary construction there. I believe they've also begun relocating some of the tenants in some of the housing that will be replaced. Basically what they're going to do is they're going to demolish 10 existing public housing units and reconfigure that whole site and build an additional 55 units. So they're actually going to be creating quite a number of more units. For that reason, the project's a little farther along in the development process, and they feel that they have a much better chance in applying for those low-income housing tax credits. So that's why we're recommending at this time that we at least earmark those home funds for them now. Local funding improves their chances with the state. As you know, it's a highly competitive process, and so we're trying to secure those funds for this community.
Thank you.
I want to chime in a question real quick. It seems to me at some meeting in the recent past, we were told that the Housing Authority was going to apply in March because they were actually the top project last cycle, but their number was too big, so they split this project in two, and they were going to apply in March, and the other project was going to apply for the July cycle. Do you know why that has changed?
It hasn't changed. That you're absolutely right. It was my understanding that the Cypress Courts developer still wanted to remain in consideration for low-income housing tax credits, but you're right. The Housing Authority did split. Or at least will be
2 phases.
Kind of 2 phases. So, but my understanding is the Cypress Court project has not withdrawn from consideration. So they are still interested in developing.
Yeah, just the part that I recalled was that they were going at 2 separate cycles so they wouldn't compete against each other. And I was just wondering why they changed their plan again. Yeah. Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, I just had 2 questions real quick. Under the economic development programs, what is the economic development program that we're referring to on this? Is this the actual hiring of? And then the next thing was the economic development revolving loan fund.
This is not referring to the economic development director position. That will be funded out of another funding source. This particular program is actually a program that the city has had for many years, in that we have a revolving loan fund for businesses that would like to apply for economic development funds. And we also have, along with this, at least a proposed program for economic development where we have some money set aside, for example, for a job fair, for microeconomic development programs, some technical assistance. So this is an option, and we would be working with the new economic development director who is hired. All of these programs could certainly be modified once that person is on board. But we've always had this program at least available.
This wouldn't be the FACADE improvement program, or was that through the RDA?
The redevelopment agency currently has that program.
So what does this one support?
The economic development program under our program, the CDBG program, provides loans to business owners if they can demonstrate that they will be hiring or retaining jobs that they can make available to low to moderate income people. So the focus for our program is actually job creation, whereas with the redevelopment agency, the focus there is actually on the physical improvement of the facility. So that's the focus. Now, under our program, a business owner could use our loan funds to improve their facade. They could, but they would have to demonstrate to the program that they're using those funds, that as a result of that improvement, they will have created or retained a job in some way. So it's part of our record keeping.
Is this a underutilized program right now?
I would say that it is. And one of the reasons we've had for it, and perhaps our new economic development director can assist us with that area, is that we found that many businesses that ask for these loan funds are either startup businesses or they have incurred a lot of debt. And so it's a challenge for staff as we review their pro formas and their financials, whether the risk is there to loan these funds. So one of the things we're hoping is that we can provide some technical assistance, maybe some training for potential job employers or job creators. But that's the primary source of inquiry has been startup companies, and they're very high risk. Again, in the past, when the city has loaned these funds, they've usually been to fairly well-established businesses. For example, Chrysler Dodge was one example that comes to mind. And this is a company that came to town. We were able to loan them funds, and they were able to open a car dealership, but they were already very well experienced.
In any cycle, you have unspent funds, if you will, that roll forward to the next year. Just in a general sense, can you tell me about how many dollars in unspent funds we have in these categories, and is there a sunset on them, like at some point it's use it or lose it, or does it just keep rolling forward until something happens?
Under the entitlement program, under the money that we get from HUD, which is now flowing through the county, there is more pressure, I would say, to spend those funds. That is somewhat dealt with by the county, because HUD monitors the county on how well those funds are being spent. But we, as one of the participants are part of how the county is able to spend the funds. So, for example, one of the projects that we currently have funds available for, which is the library HVAC project, we currently have reserved for that project a little over $500,000. So it's very important that that project begin construction in the next few months. That will assist the county in spending those funds. So in that respect, there is a timeliness concern under those annual funds. Under the program income category, which is the program income or reprogrammed available, there is not as much of a concern because those are funds that the city currently holds. We hold those available. Those are loan repayments. However, at any time, HUD could ask the city to explain why funds are being held and not being spent. So we would need to have a fairly good explanation on why the funds are sitting. And that's one of the concerns I've had with projects such as either Charlotte's Web or the theater that have sat for years, where funds have been reserved in this account where they could be spent.
In a general sense, what is the time frame HUD likes to see for things to, the money to flow in and flow out, as it were?
For the funds that come through the county, they use a formula, which is that the county cannot have more than 1.5 years worth of funding available at any given time. That's not necessarily the city's issue right now since we're a part of the consortium. In terms of the program income, there's no set date on when those funds need to be spent. I can tell you that the city currently remits interest to the Department of Treasury for the funds that are sitting in the city's account. So any interest that's earned is turned back to the Department of Treasury.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay, thank you. Who would like to have public comment on this?
Mayor Lynn and members of the City Council, my name is Susan Klein Rothschild. I'm with the Public Health Department in Santa Barbara County. The Lompoc Animal Shelter, for which we are requesting CDBG funds, was built in 1970. It serves more than 4,000 residents annually. Many people in this community enjoy and appreciate the animals and having pets. And pets and animals are very important for lots of people who don't make good connections with other people. Kids with autism, seniors who are isolated, and truly all people of all ages and all incomes who enjoy and have big hearts and want to care for animals. We're looking at a remodel of the animal shelter. The total cost is $300,000. The county has put together a plan to build upon funding from various sources of funding, including the Public Health Department, including requests to county CDBG funding, and others. The remodeling includes basic things like a public restroom for any of the residents who use the facility. We're not talking about things of choice. We're talking about basic changes in the facility that make it acceptable and ability for others to use it. In terms of the financing, we are requesting $24,000 from Lompoc CDBG funds. We're requesting $72,000 from the county CDBG funds. And then we're looking at other sources of funding to build a partnership to make this a really good place for those who use it and for the animals who are cared for there. So we're asking you to seriously consider and appreciate the offer to provide the $24,000 to Lompoc Animal Shelter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Lynn and members of the City Council, city staff, and citizens of Lompoc. I'm Jan Glick. I'm the Animal Services Director with Santa Barbara County. So I'm also speaking on the project of a request for a partnership of $24,000 towards the project of remodeling the Lompoc Animal Shelter. The shelter is not ADA accessible at the current time. It's non-compliant in all of its public areas,
And obviously, this is a much-needed change that we could provide a good improvement at that shelter. We, as you are, I'm sure, well aware, we have abundant community support, many volunteers working there 7 days a week, many citizens coming in. We provide the stray animal shelter that covers the Lompoc area, Lompoc Valley, Vandenberg Air Force Base, Buellton, Solvang, and the San Ynez Valley. So we do provide the mandated service for stray animal holding. We also do the animal control services in this area, which include the safe placement for the animals, a safe shelter for them, the rabies control program, bite investigations, cruelty investigations, loose animal pickup, dead animals. All those services are provided at that shelter for the community. We've enjoyed many community projects there. We have Eagle Scout projects frequently done at the shelter. We provide the Welfare to Work program for some of the citizens in the area. We handle nearly 2,000 animals a year at the shelter and have a 6-day-a-week operation. So we appreciate your consideration of this project included in the grant cycle this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor and Council, again. My name is Wiki Rodenhai. I'm speaking tonight about a request for $400,000 in CDBG funding for the Charlotte's Web Children's Library project. There are funds available which tonight have not been designated for use. Please make this CDBG funding available to the project when you finalize your decision tonight. The Charlotte's Web Children's Library is a unique opportunity for the City of Lompoc for a number of reasons. The generous gift of real property whose use is restricted solely for the use of a children's library is the first of those. The operations and maintenance endowment made up of seed money that if it's never supplemented by future gifts will pay for all of the operations and maintenance of the children's library for 15 to 20 years is another remarkable thing about this project. The project planning is complete and a building permit has been issued. Construction could begin except for one missing component. That missing component is construction funding. This project can go to bid and break ground if funded. When the City Council directed in 2006 that the City Administrator complete the Memorandum of Understanding between the principals of the Benton Trust, the Library Foundation, and the City, they directed the Library Director to arrange for funding through CDBG and RDA sources and others. Tonight, while considering the 2011 CDBG budget, the Council has been presented with the choice of awarding funding to its children's library project. This brings us to the biggest opportunity tonight. Construction costs are still low, and the City has a project ready for construction where these funds and RDA funds may be used in our community rather than being sent outside of our community. Please address tonight the City of Lompoc's commitment to the Charlotte's Web Children's Library project. Please direct CDBG funding as fully as possible, but at a minimum direct staff that the $281,090 be designated for the Charlotte's Web Children's Library project. After listening to staff's presentation, your concern, Mr. Starbuck, about the underutilized Economic Development Fund In my experience speaking with clients, one of the problems that I've seen with their applying for that kind of loan is that it requires that they use prevailing wage in their computation of what it's going to cost them. And what they can borrow is not really significant enough on an individual basis to make it a reasonable option for them. I'd like to request that you consider whether some of that funding can be shifted to Charlotte's Web that would provide other opportunities for employment in our community. It would help create some activity downtown and be one of the things that could help kick off the downtown. If you look on the back of the little folder I gave you some important things to keep in mind. That property is restricted in use. The funding is already been directed. You just need to follow through with what you have. And then there's a little map with what could be happening downtown with that added. There's a short summary of the budget that was included with the CDBG application, and highlighted in that is the funding that we are encouraging you to include from both CDBG and RDA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council, Molly Gerald, the Library Director. I wanted to thank former Trustee Rodenhigh she's very skilled at pulling things together and making them clear for us. That's happened over a long period of time, so thank you very much. I just want to mention that the previous council that received our report last October did direct the city to explore some funding possibilities and report back. And the president of the Board of Trustees, Al Clark, brought that up recently again, and Brad Wilkie provided a brief report to you. But I think I'd just like to point out there is an opportunity for council to express the will that the city explore possibilities outside of the general fund. What I can say to you is that the foundation and the library director, in the MOU, it is my directive to find the money using the avenues within the city that are outside the general fund, and also to apply with private foundations for funding. And what we've found in the last couple of years is that foundations are saying to us, we need to see how you can get this funding together. We need to see some city support at a level of $75,000 to $100,000 that we have applied for. I think these foundations just can't see us quite getting there, although they understand that this is a private-public partnership in the best sense. So I would encourage you, as others have, to see the project in that way, really as an opportunity to help Lompoc with its economic development by educating our community. I think that as we look at economic development, there is an opportunity to realize that only with an educated community can we lift ourselves up. We can't rely on people coming here for any number of reasons with incentives without having a community that builds itself up and is viable in the workplace of the future. So I would just encourage you to think about that. And if I could take the liberty, there was a young man who could not be here this evening, and I have his statement. It came in too late to be in the record. He's employed here. My name is Federico Cioni. I'm a recent Lompoc resident. I have a 2-year-old girl and another one who was just born last Wednesday. When I think of Lompoc, I think of a great place to raise a family, a place where people are kind, polite, warm, and friendly, where people know what it's like to be a community, A place like Lompoc actually deserves a facility like Charlotte's Web Children's Library. What a fantastic opportunity to have our children grow together, read together, learn together in the wonderful multicultural environment that is Lompoc. What a source of pride to have such an enlightened, modern, nurturing structure for our future generations to start experiencing the joy of reading, sharing, and socializing with others. This project could have a very profound, life-changing impact on many families and on the community at large. I urge the City of Lompoc to do all that is in their power to make the Charlotte's Web Children's Library a priority. Our city deserves it. Our children deserve it. It will do all of us good. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this? Seeing no one rise, we'll return to council. Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, several things have happened recently that I'm really proud of. You know, for too many years, councils sitting up here had been promising the community a community center. We're now within months of opening our community center. Not popular with my move tonight, but for years we've been promising the police or the fire department that we will have a plan. We've taken a step tonight to achieve the promise of prior councils. This is a promise. You've got the MOU, a copy of the MOU there in front of you, a copy from a prior council that promised the community, promised the library that we would make pretty much whatever is necessary to see Ms. Benton's dream come true. Here we have an opportunity as this council to take the first step to make sure that we fulfill that goal as well. So again, I'm going to recommend that I'd like to see us utilize the entire $281,000 on undesignated funds towards the library, or towards Charlotte's Web. Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak on Charlotte's Web in a moment, but first I wanted to address the Lompoc Animal Service Shelter ADA improvements. I'd like to point out that what they're requesting is approximately 1/12 of the project cost of $300,000. 24,000 is approximately 1/12 of that, and that is a service directly affecting the city of Lompoc, a service that I've used many times throughout my childhood and even recently. My sanity was thanks to the individuals who work there, and so I think that part of the recession is understanding that we're not necessarily expanding services, but we are maintaining a quality of service. And I think that being asked to provide 1/12 of the service that is directly affecting citizens in Lompoc is something that we should fulfill. So my request would be that we discuss funding that $24,000 through CDBG funds.
I think I'd like to look at all of this. I got questions about a lot of it, and there's a lot of money that's sitting here, and I don't have a warm fuzzy voting on this tonight.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Lockhart, I know that there are certain timeframes, as you mentioned. How much time do we have to make these decisions here this evening?
Right now, council doesn't have to make any decision. The budget you have in front of you today is really very, very preliminary. As you know, there are discussions going on right now in Washington.
Right.
We are just sort of surviving on, continuing resolutions. What I've understood talking to my county counterpart, that any major changes that could occur with the CDBG program wouldn't impact us until about 2012-13. So that's why they've given me the recommendation to use what is called a status quo, basically just a flat line from what we received last year. So council doesn't have to make a decision about this $281,000. Basically what I'm asking council to do is just allow me to submit a provisional budget to the county to say that, yeah, we do want our money. And they can go ahead and do what's required of them by posting the document, sending it to HUD. Basically, that's a place saver for Santa Barbara County and Lompoc that we do want to receive our funds. Even though we are an entitlement county, the county still has to ask these funds from HUD. So that's why there's this, deadline of having to do this, even though we don't have a fixed number. What I can do is I can certainly come back to council at a later time when we do have a final grant figure. That way you can know exactly what kind of money you're working with. You don't have to make a decision about this $281,000. I can tell you that the county also has a CDBG committee which is reviewing the Lompoc Animal Shelter request that was submitted to the county, and that was for a little bit more money, $72,000. So the county hasn't made a decision on their portion of the request. So we can wait until they've made a decision, and then we can decide if we want to, consider it further. So those are just some thoughts about what you might want to do with this money. No decision has to be made today on it. So I don't know if that addresses any concerns. We can always come back later.
I think that addressed my concern. Thank you.
Who's next? Councilmember Starbuck.
Who breaks these figures down? Is this done with the Human Services Commission, or just part of it that's Human Services, or do you do this on the top, or where do these numbers come from?
We do have a process, and what I do is I start from what CDBG allows. So CDBG has certain what we call caps or percentages, and that allows us to use CDBG for certain purposes. So for example, for administration, they allow us to use up to 20% of the grant for administration. So that I can figure that number in there. For human services, the grant allows us to use 15% of the grant for human services. So that's the other number that I am able to hold aside. So the balance then I can use for other purposes. So that gives me the framework of how I begin to put these numbers together. For example, the amount for code enforcement, that's carrying forward council's direction that I received last year. And I understood that council wanted to maintain that. So that's already $200,000 I'm bringing forward. So that's where some of these numbers come from. The requested on the human service end, that came from basically proposals that were submitted to the city. And so that's where these numbers have come from. So, basically, they know when the money's available and we get the requests in. And so we just begin to put the numbers and flesh them out a little bit.
So after the 35% used for admin and human services, we have 65% then that we can distribute however we feel.
That's pretty much it. Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Costa, and I understand your concern for the animal shelter, and they're here tonight and they make a very compelling argument for allowing us to give them the $24,000. However, you look at some of the other items on there. Domestic violence solutions, emergency shelter. Are they not every bit as worthy as an animal shelter? The North County Rape Crisis Child Protection Program, aren't they every bit at least as worthy of that money? The food bank. There's everything on this list that we're not putting anything forward to, but if we had the money, I'd love to give every one of the amount. I have used the animal shelter myself, and hopefully I'll never have to use one of the homeless shelters, but I don't know if I'd put the animal shelter in front of domestic violence or North County rape crisis. They said they'd like to have a restroom for public access. You know, that's nice, but I'd like to have a bed that a woman and her child could sleep in for the night. So I understand your concern, but I think there's probably other priorities that I would probably put my money in before I put it into the animal shelter. So
I think I'm going to say the same thing. She's going to say that there are two separate segments of the budget, and the ones that are in the human service program neither add to or detract from the ones in the program above. But I do have one question with regard to that. And I think I understood you correctly when you said the human service program component could be up to 15% of the total. Is that correct?
15% of the annual amount that we get from HUD or the county. Excluding
the home portion.
That's correct.
So is the $142,600 10%, or could that number in fact be a larger number at 15%?
The number you have is that 142,600 is made up of a couple of different numbers, and if you go across that worksheet, 80,000 of it is money that we get from HUD. So that's I call it the new money, the fresh money. That represents 15% of the grant. So that's where that's the 15% number. As you go across under program income, there's another rule where you can use a certain percentage of program income, and it's 15% of the program income that was expended in the prior fiscal year. In other words, what was receipted in their computer system. And that's where the 22,600 comes from. And then the final third number is human service donation, that 40,000, and that's the Comcast money, the 25,000 and the 15,000 in donations. So that's, I just want to be clear that, you know, the 142,000 is not 15% of some other bigger number.
Thank you. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does that answer your concern?
It does. I mean, what I was trying to point out that there are many worthy causes, and I agree that they're out of a different pot, though, yes.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, it appears that we're going to need to go ahead and have a motion so that you can submit to get the money. We don't even have it. And so the whole intent right now is to just give you the authorization to go ahead and request this money. This is all we're entitled. There's nothing else out there. This is what you need. So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we accept this preliminary budget, resolution number 5698-11, approving the FY 2011-2012 budget for community development, block grant, human services, and home program funds for inclusion in the draft Santa Barbara County Home Consortium.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to add with the caveat that we will be finalizing that budget, making those decisions at a future date to be determined.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion?
Just for
Sorry, I
clarification.
can't see your light, so.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lingle.
Just for clarification, I realize it is, but at that time, when you come back, we will have the opportunity to utilize that $281,000 on something. Well, right, yeah.
That's right. I mean, this number could actually be less than that. So, but I will come back for direction.
Okay, thank you.
So any other discussion on this? We have a motion and a second. Should we go ahead and vote, please? And that passes 4-0. Thank you. Item number 12 is a request to set a hearing date for the appeal of the Planning Commission approval of the Walmart expansion project at 701 West Central Avenue. And our Planning Division Manager, Lucille Breeze.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. As the mayor said, we are before you this evening to request a hearing date. The Planning Commission approved the Walmart expansion project, and on February 9th, and they adopted a resolution approving the development plan. Mr. Robert Cuthbert, representing Citizens Against Walmart Expansion, has filed a timely appeal of the Planning Commission decision, and we are before you this evening to request that the council set a hearing date. The date that was recommended in the staff report is April 19th. Mr. Cuthbert has sent forward a request to the council, which was distributed on Friday the 10th, and that request was for the hearing date to be set on May the 17th. So he stated in his request that when the previous appeal was heard, additional time was given for Walmart to garner their information. However, that additional time was due to a variety of circumstances, including the newly elected council being seated and the holiday season. So I am available for any questions, and we look forward to your direction.
If you give me just a second. Councilmember Martiner asked that I convey to the council that she would like to honor Mr. Cuthbert's request for May 17th, and I told her I would carry that forward. I'll go ahead and then I'll come back to a couple of questions.
Ms. Breeza, you touched on it. The additional time for the appeal by Walmart was not at their request.
That is correct.
Yeah, actually, it was our request, and Walmart agreed to our request.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Attorney, my one question is, that doesn't set a legal precedent by any means for making this decision, would it?
What doesn't set a legal precedent?
I'm sorry, that was, yeah. If we were to grant a later date as requested by the applicant, instead of going with the date of April 19th, which is the time frame given normally, I guess.
I wouldn't say that it would set any kind of legal precedent. The issue before you is that you need to set the hearing at the language in the code that you are guided by for setting this date is you're supposed to set the matter for a hearing at the next available council meeting following today. And so if you determine that because of other matters that you know that are coming up, that you feel that the next available date is the May date, then that's the date. If you feel the next available date is the April date, then that's the date.
Thank you.
Would you say that, back up. So when the appeal came to the council, Walmart presented a substantive amount of new information that they had gained during the period of delay, which I believe affected our decision because it was responding to concerns that had been raised by the Planning Commission. Would you say that they benefited by that longer time period in terms of bringing that information forward?
I would defer to the Walmart representative whether that information was available at an earlier time. I'm not aware of when it was actually available.
Would we be able to go look and see when that information came to us?
Well, I know when we received it, however, Walmart may have had that information and been able to provide it to the city at an earlier date.
I'm only concerned about when we received it.
We did receive it, I can give you the date. It was December 20th was when the city actually received the update to the urban decay study. and the hearing before the council on the appeal was January the 18th. And the appeal was filed on October 28th of 2010.
Okay, and what was the, excuse me, what was the Planning Commission date of the decision that's currently being appealed?
Of the current appeal?
Yes.
That was February 9th.
Okay, Councilmember Starbuck, I'm going to think about that question while you go forward.
I'll tell you, I'm looking at our proposed schedule of events that's coming up. I'd like to go ahead and suggest that we just go ahead and schedule this for May 3rd.
Okay. And now? Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no other council comment. We'll open it up to public comment.
Good evening. I'm Ellen Berkowitz. I represent Walmart. Just to answer your question about did Walmart benefit by the additional time, in fact, we actually objected to the additional time. We wanted to get before City Council as fast as possible, and we were asked to please wait until the new City Council was seated and had some time to get settled in before we had our appeal heard. So we did not ask for, nor did we want that delay. But in any event, I'd like to support staff's recommendation to set the hearing at the April 19th City Council meeting, and that would be consistent with what I believe is the intent of the City Code that requires an appeal to be set at a hearing at the next available City Council meeting, considering that this is the Planning Commission made its determination on February 9th. This would give him about 2.5 months to prepare his appeal, which I think is really more than generous. But actually, more importantly, I want to point out that Mr. Cuthbert is appealing the Planning Commission's approval of the development plan. Our development plan application was actually filed on December 15th, 2008, and I don't believe that development plan changed one bit from December 15th, 2008 to the time we were at the Planning Commission, except for the Planning Commission's decision to reduce the amount of signage that was allowed. That development plan application from 2008 has been intact. As I say, the only thing that Planning Commission changed was to ask us to make our letters smaller and the size of our spark a little smaller on our new logo. That was the only change that they made to the development plan. So by April 19th of 2011, Mr. Cuthbert will have had 2 years and 4 months within which to study the development plan and formulate his objections. And we feel that is a long enough time for him to ponder the issues that he found problematic with the development plan. We feel there's been a lot of delay, obviously. We've mentioned that on a number of occasions. We see no reason to further delay and ask that you please set this, as the code requires, for the next available City Council meeting. Thank you.
Did the City of Lompoc require you to file an EIR, or did you choose to do so?
I would say the City of Lompoc strongly suggested that an EIR would be a prudent thing to do, and we concurred.
Thank you. Staff, did we strongly encourage them to file an EIR, or was that a choice that they made?
We had discussed with the applicants both the pros and cons and indicated that since mitigated negative declarations are held to a higher standard, that the EIR might be the preferable route. However, it was the decision of the applicant. It could have, we could have prepared either document and been legally adequate.
Thank you. City Administrator, at this juncture in time, do you know what large items we have before us for May 9th? May 3rd, I'm sorry. Well, what's the budget? What's the month? That's kind of a concern. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead. Did you know, do we have anything stacked up for May 3rd?
Not at this time.
Okay, and are there any routine items that would normally recur at that interval?
I'm not aware if there are.
Kind of a lull in the storm. Okay. I'm concerned about April 19th because of the budget and the amount of time we're spending on that. I guess my recommendation would be for May 3rd. Councilmember Lingle.
Well, I was going to make a motion, but are you making a motion for May 3rd?
No, I was making a recommendation, so you can make a motion.
Okay. I move that we accept staff recommendations and set the hearing date for April 19th of 2011.
Anyone interested in a second for that? Okay, I'll try. I recommend we set the hearing for May 3rd and accept the other staff recommendations outside of that date. We've got a second for that one.
Well, I suggested it. I'm going to second it.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought you suggested May 17th in the beginning. Did you recheck that?
3rd.
May 3rd.
Yeah. You don't have to talk about it. You can just...
I'm sorry. What I'm doing is reviewing the letter to the mayor and members of the city council from Robert Cuthbert on behalf of the Citizens Against Walmart Expansion, trying to decide why they requested the May 17th date rather than the May 3rd date. Now, beyond the similar 3-month period, we're over that issue, but it just looks like their availability is May 17th. And so if that's the only issue, then I'm okay with May 3rd.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this? Councilmember Lingle.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Even though I believe it would have been proper for us to do the April 19th, since it was, I didn't get a second, I will be supporting the May 3rd.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? And can we vote, please? That passes 4-0 with 1 absent. Okay, written communications. Do we have any written communications? Nope, no written communications. Oral communications, last 2 minutes for someone to address the council. Seeing no one rise, we'll close that, and we'll go to council agency requests and announcements. Who would like to be first? I guess it's me. Okay, let's see. On the report side, I'd like to report that I'm now licensed to perform weddings on behalf of the city, that my fee is $50 in the form of a check made payable to the charity of your choice, or the Lucky Couples Charity of Choice. I was pleased to represent the city at the GI Forum in their coastal division meeting the other day. I also had a fairly extensive meeting with Rich Roselle of the Channel Coast State Parks Director with regard to increasing opportunities at the mission through the docent organization to use the mission for private events, if you will, weddings and so on. And we identified some sites, and we're now working further on that to enhance that as an opportunity to bring people to Lompoc and spend their money here. met with the Santa Barbara County School Boards the other evening, and it was a very interesting discussion about a problem they had in their organization, and they stepped up and solved it. And there was also some discussion of RDA in Sacramento, and they're on the same bus with us with regard to that and are not going off and deserting us. Is the chief still here? Yes. I would like to commend the chief on his good karma, because he and I threw out the first baseball for Little League, and it had to be him because we both hit the catcher's mitt, and for me that's almost amazing. And I represented the city at the Flower Festival Queens presentation, and I went to 24 other events in the last 2 weeks. I have a couple things, so yeah, you can leave it off for a minute. I got a little ways to go. So,
events first?
you want to do events first? Okay, we'll do events, and then we'll come back around. Go for it. Next event.
So I missed the previous council meeting, so I have a few things from before that meeting that I was unable to announce at the March 1st meeting because of my illness, but also because of my illness I was unable to attend about a week full of meeting and events, which was unfortunate. But I did want to mention that I was the guest reader at the literacy fundraiser at the Half Century Club for the Lompoc Library Literacy program, and I read Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and it was a spaghetti dinner fundraiser, so it went well, and that was a lot of fun. Let's see here. That was the week I was sick. I attended, as other council members most likely mentioned, the GI Forum lunch on Saturday, February 5th. So that was great to watch an informational video about the creation of the GI Forum. I also recently was a member on a webinar on civic engagement. There's a sustainable e-newsletter that I get every month, and so they held a free webinar, and so I got to hear from an individual who has implemented civic engagement programs on sustainability and going green in communities, and so I learned a lot, and will definitely be in contact with Utilities Department conservation employees to try to work on some fun programs over the next 4 years. And the funnest thing I did was I was the MC for the Manzanita Charter School Spelling Bee, which is, if you don't know, the charter school is located out near Vandenberg Air Force Base across the road where the old housing used to be out there. So it's a pretty dead area, and back there's a nice charter school. And so I was the MC for kindergarten and first graders. And the funnest part was when one of the first grade words was mother, and the kid just looks at me, he goes, "That's too hard," and he wrote mom. And we got a kick out of it. They're a lot of fun, and so it's been great to do things like that. So otherwise, I think that updated everybody.
Councilmember Cost, yeah, never mind.
I'm the one with short hair.
Yeah, Dirk.
Or no hair. I'm not going to go through a whole lot of events, but while I have the chiefs here, I want to give you guys a big thank you for coming out to the Airport Commission, taking your time, doing the public safety brief. Thank you, guys.
Councilmember Lingle.
Well, pretty much everything I have to report on, you guys already did. I was also representing the city at the GI Forum. What was it, past Saturday? During the past week, I have attended, I met on the Wednesday the 9th. I met with the veterans for the veterans renovation of the memorial building. On the 10th, I was at a reception at Supervisor Joni Gray's place it was a reception for the new county supervisor, Chandra Waller, which it was, you picture a person before you meet them. Ms. Waller was nothing like I expected her to be. I mean, it was just, not that I didn't expect her to be a nice lady, which she is. She's a very nice lady. Just, where are you going? No, it was just, she was just, it was just the visual and the pleasantness. It was just very nice. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I also attend that, and I would describe her as just folks. How about you, Dirk? You want to chip in on that? Okay, I have a couple things to talk about, and then I have a couple requests. This first one's actually for Councilmember Martiner, so Cecilia, I hope you get this on tape. And it says, kind of goes like this. In my capacity as mayor, I've talked to many potential businesses and received positive comments from them on the direction of this council and the staff's implementation. The number of contacts I have made are now getting secondary referrals. That means somebody who told somebody who came to me, and I'm now able to put people together that can create results. So it's all working and it's all good. On another subject, there's been a concern raised about closed-door meetings in the council office, and it happened because we had 2 in succession. So the other day, when Councilmember Acosta was sick, I was picked up in the parking lot by Councilmember Starbuck and the solid waste crew, and we went up for a tour of the landfill facilities. And when we came back, we said, well, we'll talk. But when we went in the office, Councilmember Lingle was already in occupation, and he needed a piece of information on a meeting that he and I were both going to go to, and only I made it because there was a misunderstanding about when it was. And so I asked Councilmember Starbuck to step out for a minute because we can't 3 of us talk about anything. And I closed the door and I covered that subject with Councilmember Lingle, and then he left and Councilmember Starbuck came in and we talked about solid waste, and then we went on. And the perception, I think, of someone was that I was talking to each of these people about the same thing, and one of the thoughts might be that these meetings should be held away from City Hall. I have a real problem with that, and I'm not going to do it because I think that is just not very honest. So what I would say to all of you in the audience and everyone in TV land, whichever camera is focused on me, is that we don't do those things, and we will continue to do the right things. Okay, now we have a couple things that we need to do a little cleanup work on. I have learned that the written and oral suggestions we made at the budget workshops cannot be acted on, as we did not vote on each of them. So I request a workshop period be scheduled at the end of the April 1st council meeting to either vote on the suggestions as a group or individually, to authorize staff to review them and report to the council. And I would be looking for a second and a third for that. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, you said budget workshops, so budget workshop only, or the other workshops?
Budget workshop only. The other workshops we voted, but in the budget workshop we just discussed. Next council meeting, April 1st. Our regular council meeting just added, or I'm sorry, April 5th. My bad, April 5th. Somehow I got the first on there.
And City Administrator Barcelona, can you comment on that concern?
Mr. Mayor and Council, if I'm understanding what the mayor is asking, it would be the discussion items that each of you went through each department and said, oh, I'd like to see this, or this would be good. And there were no votes on those items. So is that correct, Mayor? Is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Yes.
And City Administrator, do we need those votes in order for staff to take action on the things that we have discussed at the budget workshop?
Councilmember Costa, many of the items, some don't require a lot of time. Many of the suggestions or comments would require significant research and study time to be able to compile information for council. So on those items, it is best to get a vote by the majority of council before staff spends a lot of time researching and bringing something to you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, Ms. Barcelona, just for clarification, 2 years ago when we had our budget workshops, I believe they proceeded the way they did this year, where council made recommendations or suggestions, and then the staff went forward, prepared projection, and came back to the council. So this is different this year then?
Councilmember Lingle, last budget, if you recall, we had quite a long list of priorities, so I asked all of you to identify your top 5, and that's how we worked with the last budget.
Okay, but we didn't actually take a vote on each of those.
That's correct.
So, okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, I will second your motion. I mean, I really don't know if it's necessary that we vote on them. We didn't do it last time, but for clarification, I'll go ahead and second your motion.
All right, now we're looking for a third. Well, one of you got to turn your... Okay, Councilmember Costa.
I third.
Okay, next, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is, as we all know, you can't gas a gopher in California. The good news is that I have learned from Richard Fernbaugh, our airport director, that the airport and the Parks Department jointly own a different piece of equipment which blows gophers up. Now, personally, I'd rather be asphyxiated than blown up, but obviously the legislature of the state of California did not feel quite so good in that regard. And so the airport regularly uses it. However, the Parks Department has not used their half of it, whichever half that is. And again, this last week, both from the soccer group and from the Little League folks, I was asked to please kill the gophers. And I know that we are currently short-staffed in the Parks Department because of vacancies. So I would just like to ask the city administrator to take a look and see if we could, I don't know, bring on a part-time person, whatever it takes, to take the gopher exploder and commit mass gopher eradication in our parks. Dirk has volunteered to do it personally. Oh, okay. And so I would be looking for a second and a third to direct the city administrator to come back to us with the appropriate solution as soon as practical.
I'll second that.
Okay.
I'll third.
Okay. Does that give you enough latitude, city administrator? Okay, and the last one the city administrator asked me to bring forward, and I plead guilty, it was my fault. At the December 14th meeting, we reviewed the concept of a city policy that codes and ordinances be interpreted in the least intrusive way for applicants, and then we discussed what that meant. And I actually went back and looked at the tape, and we concluded that we couldn't conclude what that meant. And we didn't agree on the language and instead assigned the concept to the Single Purpose Committee. I'm positive 3 of us voted for it, and I think I saw everybody else nodding. So this responsibility was not included in the committee's duties approved by the council. To add this duty, a formal action now must be taken. So I request that the staff prepare an amendment to the committee's duties, adding this item. And as this will probably take a little time, we extend the committee's term by 30 days to accomplish this. And that's my request. Single purpose for building. It was the concept of a policy that when we do code interpretations, we try not to make it more difficult. Yeah.
I'll second that.
I'll third.
Okay, and then the last thing is, and this is just a matter
Mr.
of...
Mayor, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I think I need some clarification as to how you would want the Single Purpose Committee to approach this.
I guess my outlook would be that we would take the original presentation from the workshop and hand them that and go, here, make a recommendation, much as they did with regard to the recent contract.
just for the record, we're going to need to change the formally adopted format because that identifies what the commission is supposed to do, so somehow we're going to have to change that. I would suggest when we bring that back, we have the council tell us what it is they want those words to say, and then we can have the discussion of how exactly it's going to be accomplished. I understand your confusion, but we'll have them tell us.
I'm willing to work on it right now. From my standpoint, I just want them to...
Mr. Mayor, we now have this on the agenda coming up, so I would suggest that we not further discuss it.
Okay, I'm good with that. At the recent council workshops, we voted to assign certain tasks to the standing committees, and today I need some kind of council consent to forward these tasks in writing to the appropriate committees, or to have the city administrator forward these tasks in writing to the appropriate committees. What's the pleasure of the council? These were the things that we agreed to do at the 2 workshops where we actually voted on things. We don't have a process by which they transition from us to the committees in question. Committees and commissions, yes.
Give me an example of, I'm not sure.
We asked the Beautification Commission to review the plantings, to eliminate the ones that were time-consuming. We asked the Beautification Commission to review the inventory of city trees and make a recommendation on which ones were consuming more time and material to maintain them. We made a number of those recommendations, but there's not a mechanism. I don't have the ability to refer them unless you tell me I can, and the city administrator similarly needs instruction with regard to those. So I guess what I would say is, do you want me to write him a note and say, here's your charge from the council, or would you prefer the city administrator did it? Councilmember Lingle.
Let me ask the city administrator what her preference would be.
Let the mayor do it. Well, first I would need to know exactly what it is that I'm communicating. I did meet with the department heads soon after, I think it was the last workshop on the 22nd, yeah. And we reviewed all of the directives, and each department head acknowledged that that was their directive. So if there was any change, I don't know exactly what list I would be going from.
No, I think we're talking about the same items, but the committees are appointed by council members and serve with the council, and we haven't actually asked them yet to do these things that we agreed they should do. That's kind of the gap in the work plan.
If I may, just process-wise, what I would understand would have happened, which sounds like is what happened, is the department has discussed those items, and the department heads responsible for those different committees would be bringing those to those committees when those committees meet and when time permits. So I'm assuming that's the process that is going forward. There doesn't need to be some specific direction as they do that. That's what has already transpiring.
Except 2 committee members have said to me, hey, what are we supposed to do? And I've said, I don't know how this works. So that's why we're back here discussing this. Whichever one of you is first.
Mr. Mayor, before we discuss any further, it's 11 o'clock, so I think I'd like to make a motion that we extend the meeting for 30 minutes.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to extend the meeting for 30 minutes. All in favor? And that passes 4-0. Okay. Next.
I'm going to just say that typically the citizens' commissions are chaired by somebody on staff. Now, if you wanted to make sure that that word went from staff to the commission, or the mayor could put a memo to them or through staff, I think it should go through staff for the commissions, though. I don't know about the committees.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I agree that, this is something that can be handled at the staff level. Council does not need to take this any further. We have discussed it at the staff level, and if you want something further than that, please advise.
Okay, I'm good with that. Everybody good? All right, that's my list. Who else has something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to announce that I'm disseminating some information, not asking for feedback, but simply handing out information that I put together in regards to the issue I brought up at the last workshop, and that is the issue of term limits. It includes information and a draft ordinance that I know would need to go for a vote of the public and would also be written by our city attorney, but it was just a draft, so you know what the terms of, what my opinion of what the terms should be for the new ordinance. Thank you.
All right, does anyone else have anything else to present? Seeing no one, we are adjourned to Monday, the 21st at 4 o'clock for a closed session.
Thanks for a short meeting.
You're welcome.